All right, good evening, everybody. It's 6:16. To welcome everybody to the Committee for Public Works. This evening, we have 3 agenda items. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that we are that this meeting was noted.
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
And we are recording? Yep. Sounds good. Okay, so the first agenda item tonight is we are going to consider bus shelters in the North Oakland Avenue roadway design. Tonight's presenter is Rebecca Ewald.
Good evening. Well, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have relative to the memorandum within your packet. But the short Cliff Note version of that memo is that MCTS is only willing to fund and maintain one bus shelter on North Oakland Avenue, which is at the intersection of Oakland and Kenmore, both going northbound and southbound. And none of the other intersections they would be willing to fund or maintain a stack shelter because it doesn't meet their rating criteria. And so within your packet, there was a lot of detail put into how they rate their shelters and then which ones they maintain. The remainder of the questions within the packet are relative to maintenance of the shelters and questions that came from the committee at the last meeting.
Great, thank you. Trustee Lynn, do you have any questions?
I'm okay moving forward with the 2 bus shelters.
One.
It's 2 shelters.
One intersection.
Intersection, right?
Right,
2
but
and
that
1.
would be correct, northbound, southbound.
Oh,
Yeah.
both? Okay. I guess my question is, there are also a couple other intersections that seem to meet the criteria of 40 total points. Can you just remind me why these would not be also a part of our list? So for instance, we've got North Oakland. Oh, we just started. Thanks, Melissa. Sorry, Melissa. So Oakland Capital, 40 points.
There is a shelter currently installed at that location.
Okay, shelters currently installed there, and there was a couple other ones.
So there's shelters at all of the other locations
okay.
identified, with the exception of a shelter located on the southeast corner of Oakland and Capitol, in front of the tall building.
Okay.
And so typically there you'll see when you drive by, there are pavers and things of that nature. Those would need to be removed. MCTS does not prep the land for any type of shelter installation. So the recommendation from them on that shelter was that at such time that there's an improvement made in that location, that it be considered.
Okay. And we'll need to remove the pavers on the Kenmore and Oakland location, correct?
Correct. And that's going to be built into the design of North Oakland Avenue. So this is essentially the last design item that we're waiting to give to the engineers so that they can finish that North Oakland Avenue design.
And then we'd expect this bus shelter to be there for 2026?
Correct.
Okay. So we're 3 years away from having this bus shelter there.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, I know you're just getting into it here. Do you have any questions about bus shelter? We're making a recommendation. Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we should move ahead with this for now and just get it on the list for the Oakland Avenue reconstruction. And I think at a time in a future date, if we have fewer other projects going on around the community, maybe we could explore a couple of these other options that are a little bit closer to maybes. But I don't think there's like an urgent need like there are for some of the other projects that we're working on now. And I think just fitting this in with the Oakland Avenue reconstruction is as smooth as we can make it.
Fantastic. I know that we have some residents here to potentially speak on this matter. You guys are interested in speaking? Just your name and your address.
1827 East Kenmore Place. I'm here on behalf of the Parks and Public Spaces. We talked about this at a meeting, I think it was last month's meeting. Generally, I'd say that we support more bus shelters because we're interested in enhancing opportunities for multimodal transportation. We're interested in bicycle and pedestrian safety. And we see this as one of the things that can encourage more people to take buses. Fully support having that one that you're talking about installed. I wish that MCTS was a little more generous in their support and would be installing more. There's several intersections where there's 40 or more points in their analysis. And long term, I like to see serious consideration of having more along Oakland. I've heard comments sometimes about people don't ride the buses in Shorewood. I'm a frequent user of the Green Line. I think the Green Line is just a fabulous resource, and we should do whatever we can to encourage it. You know, I use it to go to the theater. I use it sometimes even to go to the airport. I think it's a tremendous asset that we have, and we should do whatever we can to support the Green Line and more generally bus transportation. So, on behalf of the committee, I thank you for your support of that one shelter, and I urge you to think seriously as opportunities arise to be building more shelters.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I was just going to say thank you and agree. We do have a number of transit users in Shorewood, and the more people use transit, the more we'll be able to get service here and, you know, preserve what we have and hopefully expand. So hopefully more folks will want to start using transit and realize what a great way it is to get around Milwaukee.
I agree. With that, I could make a motion unless Trustee Lynn, you'd like to make the motion?
Sure, I'm happy to. I recommend that the village board proceed with requesting MCTS to install a B2 shelter at both the northbound and southbound Kenmore and Oakland bus stops and include the shelters within the design for North Oakland Avenue.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for putting together all this information.
I know a lot about bus shelters.
I really wish we could do more design work to the shelters, but we'll save that for another time. Next on our agenda, we're here to review a planter modification to improve sightlines at Capitol Drive, Estabrook Parkway. You know, I will pass it off to Leanne, but if you're interested in speaking about it, but I was the one that brought this to the village manager and Leanne to bring back to this committee. This actually came up after I was just you know, honored to have been able to meet with, you know, about 40 residents at the Oaks. And, you know, I walked in thinking I have a couple friends that live there. I walked in thinking I'd meet, you know, 5 or 6 people, but it was basically, you know, half the Oaks were in a room. And it was a fantastic conversation. But they really had two things that they were adamant about talking about. And one was this planter that's right outside of the Oaks and Harbor Chase. It's about 3-4 feet high. 3 feet high, Leanne, would you say? About 3 to 4 feet high. Plus there's a lot of plantings that make the that obviously there's a tree and a lot of shrubbery that kind of make it maybe that 5 foot, 6 foot. So a lot of the residents at the Oaks and at Harbor Chase, when they're exiting Estabrook Parkway, where that kind of main parking lot is, they have no idea if there's incoming traffic coming on Capitol on the other side of the street, which would be going eastbound or which would be going westbound. A lot of the times, from what I've heard residents say, is, you know, they don't feel comfortable, but they cross themselves and just drive out into traffic and hope they don't get hit. That scares me. You know, that I think this was kind of a blind spot. I mean, I think, you know, if you read through the materials, we built that planter before the Oaks or Harbor Chase was there. But we do have a community of people that are you know, that potentially have vision problems to begin with, and that can create a lot of sight sort of line issues with oncoming traffic. Residents will take a right and then go around and take another left. So I think all of the explanations of what people do to get around this planter made me really want to bring this back to this committee and discuss different options, because I think that could be a real hazard, and I'd hate to see an accident with one of our seniors. I know this particular planter has been hit twice in the last couple of years. And, you know, I feel like if there's anything we can do to remove it, to bring it down, to make the sight lines of oncoming traffic for those residents more visible, then I think they would all appreciate that quite a bit. So in this packet, there's a couple different options. The options were to, basically reduce the planter in half, and reduce kind of the height of the plantings, or remove the planter altogether. And nope, not remove altogether.
By the option presented in the memo was to remove the planter.
Okay.
There's no option to reduce it.
Oh, I thought I read that in the
No.
in this part here. Okay. Well, that's great. I'm in favor of removing the planter.
So I think what we would be looking at this evening would be for the committee to provide a recommendation that would then go to the village board. The engineer did a preliminary review and thinks that it's not extremely complicated to remove that planter, but it will need to be a capital budget request because we are talking in the realm of capital budget dollars for that work. So I think my recommendation would be that the Public Works Committee make a recommendation to the full board. And Rebecca, please chime in if you think differently. Then we would then use the village engineer time pay on an hourly basis for them to develop demolition plans for it, and develop a full cost estimate. So then that could then be included in the 2024 capital budget.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. And when, I guess you probably don't have a ballpark idea of costs for that.
I do not, though I can tell you that based on what I've been told and what I believe I understand, it will exceed $10,000.
Okay. $20,000?
It will exceed $10,000.
Okay. All right.
That's all I'm willing to go on record for at this point.
At least it doesn't exceed $100,000. So we've got that going for us. Well, I'd love to hear what the other trustees kind of think about this.
I'm really hesitant to get rid of it altogether. I understand the concerns with turning left there. Oakland Capitol is a fast street. People do come blazing down that street. I think if there were any other option, like maybe get rid of a couple of the more tree-like plants that are in there and lower some of that foliage to maybe make a couple of places to see through. I would much prefer to just adjust slightly what's planted in there than to demolish the entire planter. I'm just not sure it warrants taking the whole thing out. So that's kind of where I'm at. Does that seem like an option to remove some of the plants?
We could certainly do that, at least on an interim basis. Look at removing the woody perennials, trees, shrubs, and then replace any other plantings with either nothing, and just fill it with stone or something, or try and replace it with a ground cover type material.
Sure.
That there'd be greenery there, but it wouldn't have the visual impact that it has.
Mm-hmm.
That would certainly be an option as well.
Okay.
And that, I think, if you wished, you could certainly just direct us to do that. That would be a relatively inexpensive proposition.
I do remember many of the residents saying if the village can't get it done, they will just go outside and remove it themselves. So I'm just kidding. They did say that, but I don't think they are going to do that. But that's how much they despise the planter.
I can understand that position. In retrospect, it may be that there should have been an analysis of that done and some modification made to that as a part of that development. But if we were to remove the existing vegetation and bring it much lower to the top level of the planter, there really would not be any reason, in my opinion, that you would not be able to see traffic on the other side of it. I mean, at most, that planter's 30 to 36 inches tall. If you add another couple of inches of vegetation, and then when I say a couple, I mean 2, 3, potentially 4 max, you would be able to see oncoming traffic easily over the top of the planter.
I have one more question. Could we possibly look at on the intersection itself, painting, I don't know what the term is, but like lane lines, like you see sometimes in more suburban communities where they don't have a median, but they have a lane that you can pull into and it shows being able to turn either way. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm sorry, I don't.
I can draw it.
Okay.
It's basically like you've got your streets going either way, and then in the middle where they have openings to other businesses, they'll have arrows, and the street lines are painted, and it shows the width of, and the point of it is to show where your car needs to be in order to. Okay. Yeah. We couldn't do that in this intersection. Okay.
Sure. So the configuration that Trustee Lynn is referring to is what is typically referred to as a shared turn lane, which will be a full and consistent lane that separates the different directions of traffic, and that the intention of that lane is to allow shelter for left turning vehicles, but it doesn't designate whether it is, it doesn't designate a preferred direction. So it's just a shared turn lane. You could be going eastbound and turning left, or you could be going westbound and turning left. You use the same lane. We don't have that type of configuration in this location. So it could not be marked that way.
Okay. All right.
Trustee Baldo?
I agree with Trustee Lynn. I would be much more interested in lowering the height of the plants and hoping that, and seeing if that kind of solves the problem. I also think, and I hear the concern that people have and have shared with Trustee Ursink about the visibility, but I think it's just it's a difficult intersection either way. It's, pretty wide to be making that turn, especially for the people who are, turning left coming out of Estabrook Park. I just think it's a tough intersection. And I mean, to me, if there is a significant safety concern, probably the thing that we would need to look at is making that like a right turn only. Now, I'm not suggesting that we do that right now, but if there are a lot of problems. But I'm also curious if Chief Worth has expressed any concerns about this intersection or what the police department has said.
None that I'm aware of.
Okay.
However, there was no request for her to provide comment at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I agree. Like it's tough coming out of Estabrook, and there's nothing blocking your sight from the other direction. There's nothing that will make this easier other than just reducing or slowing down the cars on Capitol. I think we could look at I think it would be helpful, especially when I look at the pictures of the thing itself. The first half of the planter, I could absolutely see removing the first half, those tall trees. I don't know, but I mean, how far back do you need to go before you recognize that there's a car coming? I mean, if you look at it from the angle on the pictures, and I drove past it last night to explore this exact situation, I would say I was able to see through, and granted it is winter, it's not full, but I think if we get rid of the first few trees on there and leave that first section low, that's an adequate space to see whether or not there's traffic oncoming.
From an aesthetic standpoint, I can review this with our horticulturist, but I would say just off the cuff, it would be my recommendation to him that we remove none or all.
Okay.
Just to keep things balanced and for aesthetic
to make
reasons.
it look nice. That's very reasonable. Yeah.
Leanne, is this the only planter that we have in a median in Shorewood?
It's the only raised planter that we have. Well, raised to that height, raised.
And then just to my other trustees, the reason you wouldn't want to remove it is more so a capital, sort of like a cost sort of situation, or is it something aesthetically about it that you're interested in keeping it?
For me, it's both. I don't want to just lay concrete. It's a huge space to have just concrete. So.
Just to clarify, the memo addressed bringing the planter to ground height and then replacing the plantings.
So
I see. Okay.
It would be ground and still plantings.
Sure.
So we're talking about no plantings at all and a planter, or plantings and bringing it down to ground level with plantings at ground level.
I see. Then yes. Then my concern is just the capital at this juncture.
Okay. So it does not sound like we have consensus on moving this forward then to the full board. Or do we move this forward? Would you like us to move this forward to the full board with just removing plantings? How would you like us to proceed with this?
I don't personally think that's necessary. It's really not a policy.
Yeah.
Direction. It's not a significant cost resource issue.
Mhm.
So if there's agreement from the committee that that's a preference to improve sightlines, I have no problem with that if Rebecca's okay with that.
Would there be any plantings in this at all? Or would this just be an empty planter?
So as I mentioned, we would probably look to put some sort of a very, very low growing ground cover type or very low growing perennial. But nothing,
Type.
nothing like is there now.
Does this serve any, just asking, does this serve any purpose? Like, does this help with groundwater?
No, I think the intent was when it was designed was to provide a gateway entrance feature.
Okay.
And so one other question then. So if, to remove the current plantings and, plant shorter ones, it's like the same plants that would be similar plants, at least to what we would do if we took the whole thing out.
I think they'd be much shorter.
Similar height.
No, I think they'd
These would
be
be
much
shorter?
shorter.
Okay.
Because if we took the entire thing out, we could easily look at a 12 to 18 inch perennial type
Got it.
planting. Here, I'd probably be looking at something that was in the neighborhood of 6 or less.
Okay.
So from aesthetic perspective, people won't really see what's planted in there. They're just going to see the planter coming in. So does that
See
kind of
green,
defeat-
probably, maybe some color, but there won't be, it won't be feature plantings. But I'd have to confer with Ben on, what he thinks might work best and provide some green or some color, but with very little height.
Now, if we do this, seeing that this is kind of the gateway to Shorewood, if we do this, does it take away that aesthetic sort of feature of a gateway if it's just kind of this planter with greenery that you're not going to be able to really see as you approach, as opposed to what's there now? Because what's there is nice. I really,
Yeah,
I think I really appreciate what we have there right now, but I think it's just kind of one of those situations where if you do take Esterbrook Parkway and you do try to turn right, it is dangerous. Even I felt like it was dangerous even for me to do it, let alone somebody that might be in their 70s. Or 80s. I don't know. So I think from aesthetic perspective, we'll just have a big planter with some low greens that nobody will see. My question is that more aesthetically pleasing? That just a big planter? I mean, you don't need to comment on that. I just don't want to make the wrong decision. If we remove this, are we creating kind of an eyesore then? Mm-hmm. So where do we care about having an eyesore? Do we care about having this aesthetic sort of thing, or do we care about sort of, safety, issues? So if we remove this, we might just have this giant eyesore sort of as people approach Shorewood. And I don't really want to do that. But at the same time, I from hearing from these folks at the Oaks, that was definitely every person to a T comment on that. So I guess if we go forward with this right now, I don't want to create this, have this kind of an eyesore. So I guess I put it
Yeah,
back to you
I have a
guys.
question. Knowing that if we were to remove the planter, that's part of the 2024 capital budget, when does that come up?
I'm sorry, when does that,
So when would that decision happen if this was part
as
of?
a part of the budget?
Okay, so it would be a little while.
Couple months.
So, I mean, to me, I don't want to have a lot, I don't want to make, like multiple rounds of work for your staff, but also if we know that this is a safety issue, it seems like we would not want to wait several months to start the process of this going into the budget, and we would want to get those plants out.
I've got kind of an idea. What if we get the plants out and see what it looks like for those couple months until we have to really make that final decision? And if we're like, and if this turns out to be kind of an eyesore, then we can all kind of huddle back and decide what we want to do going forward.
We can certainly, we can certainly work toward that end. Understand that May, June is the busiest time for our horticulture staff. So they're really, what I could probably commit to prior to the growing season is to remove things.
Mhm.
At this point, I can't really commit to replacing anything until we're probably into, the preliminary budget discussions. Just because there isn't
makes
going to
sense.
be time capacity to do that. So, I could have Ben go in and remove the shrubbery, the trees, and leave whatever plantings, whatever perennial plantings are there to the extent that they're not disturbed. And then we can kind of just keep checking in. That would be the easiest thing to do, and that probably would have the largest impact, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Like I said,
It would give us some time to really just see if this, how much difference it makes. And it might not make any difference. It might make a world of difference. Aesthetically, people might be really upset and start calling us. So I think, instead of committing to the $10,000 plus to remove this planter, if we just go ahead and remove the trees, we able to repurpose those trees, or are they're just
No.
gone?
they'll be, so what we'll do is we'll cut them close to ground level.
Yeah.
But if we were to remove the root ball there, then everything's coming out of the planter.
Yeah.
Like there's no plantings left because you'll destroy them with the removal of the root ball and those.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, that would be my preferred avenue.
Mhm.
Cut the trees. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
I hate to say that, and then see where we're at.
I'm good with that.
All right. Like plan?
Sure.
Do you need us to make a motion, or is that just something?
Yeah, just for notes purposes, I would prefer that you
Okay.
did that.
So I'll just take a crack at it. So I hate to have a motion about cutting trees, but I mean, I think it is a safety concern, and I think takes precedence. So I'd move to remove trees in the planter on Capitol and East, or Capitol and what is it, Esterbrook Parkway. And we'll just remove the trees for now.
Friendly discussion.
Yeah, please.
For what purpose?
For the purpose of community safety.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did that translate? Sure.
Trustee Ursink moved to remove the trees and planter on Capitol and Esterbrook Parkway for the purpose of community safety.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, so the next agenda item is consider recommendation for ordinance 3054, an ordinance amending parking regulations on North Esterbrook Parkway, south of East Capitol Drive. We have Bart here to kind of go over that item.
Sure. It's a pretty straightforward ordinance request, I believe, perhaps based on the same conversations you were having with residents of the Oaks. When the street was put in, it was relatively new and didn't, I don't think, got reviewed as consistently within the transportation and parking analysis as the other streets did because our maps were old. And so just in reviewing it, it is less than 30 feet. So to be consistent with the rest of the street network in the village, it is staff's recommendation based on the transportation analysis that we prohibit parking on that street year round on one side. The only real question that we had internally back and forth is whether we remove it on the east side or the west side. We currently have no winter parking on the west side. So from a consistency standpoint, it'd be logical to just use those poles and keep that regulation and just say no parking year round on the west side. Alternatively, you could move the no parking to the east side where you would have an opportunity for more parking on the west side because the driveways and the site distances, but it's really not that heavily trafficked in terms of, fast cars and things of that nature. So it is drafted to remove it on the west side, which is quite honestly the easiest to implement. People are used to that. And so it's not really changing anything for anyone. And we could simply replace the signs from no winter parking to no parking year round. So that is what's in your packet. If there's any other questions or if you have thoughts on other options, we'd be happy to hear them.
Yeah, so this was another item that I brought up after speaking with the residents, and this was also a big concern for them. I think one of the concerns was people parking super close to that stop sign, and this is another sightline issue that I think a lot of people had coming in and out of that, and that parking would be on the east side of the street. I think if we were to, I think it would go a long way if we were to move one side or the other. I'd be in preference of the east side just because that's what I heard the most complaints about. But if we can get the west side done, then, I think that'll also be very helpful for people. And if it's easier, it seems like a decent compromise for the village and the residents here, unless anybody else has.
So wait, I'm sorry, which side is removed? The east side, it would be removed?
Oh, the west side is currently a winter regulation, right? And it would just be year round.
Okay.
So that's like the side that's like basically on the park. So like if the river's to your to your right.
Yep.
And the west side, people are parking there right now. And they tend to it seems like, the times that I've kind of come through, people are parking right up to that stop sign, although they should be 10, 15 feet behind the stop sign. They park right up in there, and there seems to be a lot of traffic, a lot of people parking. Yeah.
But if we made it parking only on the west side, that would leave us with more parking spaces because the west side doesn't have any driveways or anything.
Correct.
Okay.
Like I said, Leanne and I went back and forth on, we don't know if there's a perfect option, but there are options for either east or west. It'd be at your discretion. If you have it on the west side, you're more likely to get people crossing the street, walking to Harbor Chase because that's where they're going, but they're probably exiting their cars and walking in the road on some level anyways. And so it is a slower street. And so I think I personally think it's an option on either side, but to Trustee Ursing's point, if you remove it on the east side, then you are eliminating that parking too close to the stop sign. You're getting more parking because you are having a continuous stretch of curb as opposed to, I believe, 3 curb cuts and driveways. And then just exiting and entering those driveways, you have better sight distance or sight lines as well because there's no one parked, near that driveway. So it would just be a matter of, it would require more work to install the signs and perhaps some enforcement headaches as we get started because people are used to parking on that side. And so we'd probably have to, make some communication with Harbor Chase or whoever's parking there to make sure their employees are not doing that. But long term, that could be the better solution.
Isn't it? Any idea how many extra parking spots we can get in there? Have you thought of that?
You're probably looking at, 3 to 4.
I just think with the with the sightline issue, I think it'd probably be better to have all the parking on the west side, especially if people are actively concerned about not being able to see that direction, the eastern direction, and with people parking so close to the stop sign there. And I feel like, and it'll be kind of a pain to have to switch the signs, but there probably are, there are poles on both sides probably, right?
I
'Cause
took pictures
one-
today. I
one
don't think,
side
I don't think they're
probably
on the east
said
side.
The Winters.
If I can, let me double check. I went out this afternoon, took pictures, see if I can find any.
It's not a very long stretch. It's
It's a short stretch.
it's a short little. It's a short stretch.
My long-term preference would be only parking on the west side. I mean,
I'm not seeing any
I
poles
agree
on
with that.
the east side, but that, obviously you can add, there's no light poles for sure. I don't see any poles. They would have to be added. Yeah, I'm not seeing them on the east side. On the west side, the light poles are on the west side of the street, and that's where the parking sign is currently affixed to.
Okay.
But I don't want to commit work to DPW, but obviously they
there's
install
probably
poles.
at least one or two poles on the east side. Because they would have to say the no parking in the winter, right?
That's on the west side. It's currently no parking on the west side from December 1st
I'm
to
sorry.
March 1st.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you for the.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm getting it. Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Baldoff.
Yeah, I would be in favor of having the parking on the west side. I know it's a little bit more of a headache for staff, unfortunately, but that seems like the better long-term option here.
Yeah, I feel like if somebody needs to be dropped off, they can, pull up, drop them off, and then leave. So I hate to make more work for Leanne. I'm sorry, Leanne, but I would also be in favor of just parking on the west side of the street. All right, so I make a motion here. Let's see.
Do we make a motion, or is this because, or would we have to adjust the ordinance?
Yeah, I'd just be looking for a motion with a direction to amend the draft to modify the parking to be on the west side as opposed to the east side, and I could make that modification.
You could make,
and bring it back to the board for the next consideration.
Great.
Okay. So we could read, are we okay to go on? So I could say I move to recommend ordinance 3054, an ordinance amending parking regulations on North Estabrook Parkway, south of East Capitol Drive, to only allow parking year-round on the west side of the street.
That's very clear.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it there. Thank you so much, Bart. Leanne. With that wraps up all of the items we had for Public Works this evening. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn Public Works.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 6:54 p.m.
It's 6:45. I will call this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. And we have one item on our agenda, which is the fourth quarter budget and finance report. And I will transfer this over to the finance department.
And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there a staff overview?
Do you want us to go through the memo?
Sure.
I think traditionally Mark would go through like top lines, any outliers, stuff like that. Although words been there for
Right.
So
I don't know if it's going to be as intimately familiar, but if there's any questions with regards to the report, I'm happy to
I didn't have any questions.
answer whatever questions you would have.
I had a couple and they're just, some of them are just from my information. For some reason, under expenditure summary, I see OGA legal costs, and that's just an acronym I'm not familiar with or just totally forgot.
Other government administration. So we account for both our legal costs and then our court legal costs within that account.
Okay. And under court, the first paragraph item under general fund revenues on page 2. Activities by the SDC due to a major repayment.
State debt collection.
State debt collection, thank you.
So when we have people who don't pay after a certain period of time, we then send their accounts over to the SDC and then they do the collection process with them directly.
Okay. And I guess, when I was going through the document itself, one thing that stood out to me was, the street lighting, the overage of 70,000. Luckily offset by what appears to be an $85,000 reduction in winter operations. But I'm guessing the street lighting is, we currently don't have an electrician, right?
We actually did hire for that position. He's not an electrician. I don't believe he's like a certified electrician, but he's familiar with electrical work. So for the majority of last year, we were without because we recruited 3 times, 4. Yeah, we had 3 to 4 recruitments just to try to find someone to get someone in the position to be able to help with this. So for the majority of the year, we did not have anyone. That's what resulted in us contracting out for those services. Now we do have someone on board who's just really been a pleasure.
Oh, what's the name?
Eric Butler.
Eric Butler, okay, good to know. One, I think two, probably this is attributable to the system failing faster than anyone could have anticipated. Under the parking utility fund, you deferred to the maintenance of the village hall parking lot. That's on page 4. So we're talking about the lot road to the east of us, is that correct?
Correct.
I guess I was under the impression that that lot, some of our parking lots go. Anyway, I can ask Leanne about that at another time.
What's the question?
What's wrong with the parking lot?
From time to time, they'll do general maintenance. I know not this year, but last year we did, or pardon me, at the time the ISFD moved out, we redid the approaches. Hi, Amy. We're going to be in the boardroom. We're just finishing up. You know, there was maintenance that needed to get done on the approaches. Again, falls within the scope of maintenance.
After who moved out?
NSF, pardon me.
Police department.
Well, after we sold the building to NSFD and terminated their use of the rear
Oh, I see.
portion of the
Okay,
parking lot.
okay. And then, I guess the reading of the sewer utility, just to note the sewer utility there, the third sentence, in aggregate, the water utilities bottom line, that should be sewer, right? A net change in equity of over $500,000. A shortfall is not that big, but I'm just wondering, do we know why there was that shortfall?
And sewer, water.
Some various system repair and maintenance needs that would put us a change in equity. I'm assuming that's to the negative of over 590,000.
Oh, you're in
Right.
sewer.
I'm sorry, sewer, yeah. And that change in equity, was that a plus or a you know what I'm saying?
We had a shortfall of 325. I'd have to ask Mark
The change
specifically.
in equity would be, is it a positive then? You know, I
If you have any clarification.
Yeah.
Mark.
okay.
Happy to.
I guess I just wanted to know, I noticed on general fund expenditures, we talked a little bit about credit card fees are overdue the release budget number, but I just wanted to point out again that we've talked about, and this is for George. We talked about, and I don't have the specific date, but we talked about wanting to get a report for budgeting for the 2024 budget about possibly moving the credit card fee from village absorbing it and passing it on to consumers. So when they pay their utility bill, their water or their sewer bill, currently the village is paying that fee, my understanding. And we were looking for a report at budget time next fall about possibly passing that on to the consumer and how that would affect our numbers.
Could you short that question?
So currently, the village incurs, like if I pay my water bill or my sewer bill
Yeah.
with my credit card, the village currently absorbs that 2 to 3% fee. And it looks to me that it's fairly significant enough that I believe we voted as a matter for future consideration that we would, for budgeting in 2024, that we would like a report from finance about what would happen if we pass that on to the consumers, to the residents. So I guess we're looking to see across departments, every place that you could pay for a fee with your credit card. Yeah, and how hard would that be to implement? You know, currently the village is just paying all those fees, but let's see who takes a card here. DPW takes a card.
So well, I think a more efficient way to do it would be to look at our credit card summary and the usage and just how that would track.
Okay.
But then I think one other factor that needs to be taken into account is if it's going to impact customer usage. You know, sometimes it's just like the tax payment thing. People can pay with their credit card online, but when they see how much it adds on, will they still go to do it? Will there be any impact in terms of what we see or don't see? I don't know.
So that's what we would like staff analysis of. How difficult would it be to do it, and what do we think, how would it affect payment models?
How long have we been accepting credit cards and covering? It's been a while.
I would hope so. For property taxes, though?
I mean, I think
I
I
would,
wouldn't pay property taxes with a credit card, but to each their own.
I don't, well, you know, there are lots of different reasons people do it. They do, but.
I mean,
I would have to
that's
add,
a lot of miles.
the tax payment would probably be the longest one out there. There was never really a push to go put people to credit card base, but now just the way that we transact business.
But police,
Parking-
citations.
Parking permits, we have the highest rate of parking citations and permits with online transaction over pretty much most people. I mean, we have like 70% of our people pay online.
And so they're paying that fee themselves. No, we're paying that fee for them.
We're covering at 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at the police credit card fees. It looks like there was like an accounting error on the budget number. Greater than expected success in the organization. Yeah, so it's about $10,000 more fees on our end for parking permits and parking fines. So it just adds up, just something to look at.
And honestly, I mean, I wonder about a parking fee versus water and sewer. You know, when you're talking about this, the numbers are gonna be a lot bigger, right? Well, I don't know how much
Depends on what you're paying, like a month. Parking.
anyway, I think it's an important thing. I'm pretty sure we had an item for future discussion.
We did. We just noted that we weren't sure when that was going to be available and ready to be done just because of
Sure.
coming on board.
And so what do you think would be a good time to do it?
I don't know at this time. We're
Okay.
pretty new into this process. So we can take a look at it.
Like budget begins in September, so.
Mhm.
Then or later, or I mean, sometime in the September period. Okay. And otherwise, looks like we were blessed by a light winter. 1,000-gallon winter operations, that's good. Budget, okay. I didn't have anything else.
No, pretty straightforward.
What was this information? Oh, trustee.
And trustee Arndorfer is excused for the record.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion then unless there's something else.
adjourn.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the meeting is adjourned at 6:56.
Oh, is it a roll call vote? Yes. We'll call the roll.
Trustee Ursink,
Yes.
President McCaig,
Yes.
Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
Trustee Lynn.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And so for those members of the public, we'll invite you to step outside. We will close the doors, conduct business, and then reopen, make a motion to go back into open session. Oh, funny. You could use one for the meantime, this one for the meantime.
And we're now being recorded. Is there a motion?
I move to go back into open session.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokebrand, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion? All those in favor, roll call. I think.
President McCaig,
Yes.
Trustee Arndorfer, or I'm sorry, Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
Trustee Kudo.
Aye.
Trustee Ursink,
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Get them.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
And obviously this is closed sessions, so it's not spoken of.
Back.
Okay.
Oh.
So thank you. So we are now at item 4, special order of business. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Item 4A, overview of EDI strategic planning work plan, Cairo Communications. I believe Dr. Blanks is here this evening. If you need a minute to get settled, I know you just came back in. So.
I'm glad to be back with you to talk about the work plan. And I know sometimes when people look at the planning, they may wonder why it takes so long. But what I've learned through quality improvement training is that planning is crucial, and the better you plan, the more effective your implementation will be. So this plan is, the work plan is the phase 2 of this initiative. Phase 1 was the environmental scan. Phase 2 is the work plan creation and development. And then phase 3 will be the strategic plan implementation. So I'm not going to read through all of this, but want to just say that what we've identified in the environmental plan are those 10 findings, which we talked about at the last time I was here. And they really focus on 4 different phases that I will talk about in a minute, but just want to say that these 10 findings are the foundation for the work plan. But does that mean that these are the only things that we can address? Of course not. Part of what will happen during the work plan is that as we move forward, there will be discussion, and you and staff and others will make that decision as to what should be in the plan. I could have written a strategic plan for you, but it wouldn't have been a good, effective plan because I'm one person looking at this from one lens. And it really means that the board and the staff are critical in developing this plan so that you have the strategic plan that works for you for Shorewood. So if we go to the second page, I want to talk about how we transition from the environmental plan to work plan implementation. And for me, and I hope for you, there are two main goals that we're trying to achieve. The first is to dismantle barriers that perpetuate marginalization, inequity, and exclusion. But once you eliminate something or dismantle a set of barriers, you leave a void. And if you don't fill the void with what you want, it will be filled with something that perhaps you don't want. So the second part of that, after dismantling the barriers are in process, then you want to implement strategies that create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. So you eliminate one set of barriers and you implement strategies to build the type of environment that you think is best for Shorewood. In doing that, I've identified 4 objectives, and those objectives focus on designing a strategic approach, optimizing internal operations, creating an inclusive community, and investing in sustainability. So what I've basically taken, and you see that on page 2, is I've taken each of the 10 findings and identified which of those 4 objectives they fall in. There's always room for debate. Should it fall in this one versus that? And what I've done is give my best guess and my view. But again, as we go through the work plan development, we can make changes if we see fit. To be effective, the work plan must incorporate these elements. And so I've identified 10 key elements that I'll go through somewhat briefly. One I want to spend some time on, and that is alignment with the racial equity framework adopted by the Village of Shorewood. What I've heard in my meetings with you is a desire, and you actually adopted the framework that Milwaukee County had created. You adopted it several years ago. And so I've really focused on that. I had the opportunity to meet with 3 of the Milwaukee County staff that are involved in their strategic planning actually this morning, and they are feeling good about Shorewood. They think you are, I won't speak for them, but they think you are one of the villages that is working in the right direction, taking a lead on this issue of equity. And so they want to be supportive of you. The reason I thought it was important to meet with them is I wanted to better understand what this framework meant from their perspective, and also to engage them in working with me so that when I'm talking about something, I'm not just talking from Deborah Blanks's perspective or from Cairo's perspective, but I'm bringing in information and resources and perspectives from the county. The county, quite honestly, when they look at strategic planning right now, they're not even looking at this broad plan that has all of these different elements, and racial equity and inclusion is one piece of that, but they're looking at racial equity and their objective of making Milwaukee County the healthiest county in the state as their overarching strategy. And so all else falls underneath that. So I think our relationship, which actually President McCaig has fostered, really sets us up well to be in partnership with the county. The other thing I've done is I'm also engaged, as if I need to go back to college, but I'm engaged in a online certificate program with Cornell University focused on diversity and inclusion from a human resources perspective. Again, because it's not just about me and my opinion, but it's me bringing in the resources that I think make me a better consultant and will make my working with you, we will strengthen this work plan and this strategic plan. And so I just wanted to mention that because I think one voice is good. I'm good at what I do, but I'm just one voice. And so this has to be Shorewood's plan. This has to be infused with knowledge from different resources. So aligning with the county, I think, is critical. But your participation is even more critical. You set the stage, you set the framework, you identify the mission. The staff can do a great job in the things they'll be working with me on, but they want direction from you. They need to know, what is your mission? What is your vision? What are your expected outcomes from the work plan and thus from the strategic plan? So I'm hoping that we'll be able to engage if not this month, in April or May, to start that dialogue. So you inform me, and thus we have a better, stronger work plan and then strategic plan. The staff, of course, I want to work with, and I've started working with them, and Rebecca's been very good in inviting me to the department head meetings. But they are critical in this as well, not just with making the environment more engaging for staff, but also in helping reimagine critical human resources processes, purchasing and contracting processes, and hopefully we'll identify other processes and systems to improve. So those are three elements. The county's work is important. Cornell University, that's good, but the foundation for this is you as a board and then staff as well. When we look at other key elements that are in here, we're talking about looking at the impact of this strategic plan on your priorities. I've been informed that there are priorities that you believe, and I would agree, are very important and at times will be more important than this strategic plan. I recognize that, I accept that, but I want to know, how does this plan impact those priorities, and how do those priorities impact the plan, just so I can make sure I'm walking in concert with your efforts and your priorities. We want to engage stakeholders other than staff and board at some point, but we need to know when the time is right to do that. And so that's something that you will help me identify. We want to identify not just the stakeholders in government or not even residents, but also you have a business community. Those are stakeholders. You have activists. They are stakeholders. You have other resources in the community that we need to invite in. Just as we invite them in, we also want to invite people that are outside of Shorewood. I believe I mentioned in the previous meeting that when we were looking at the hiring process, and Chris and Rebecca and I were talking about it, one of the things we talked about was resources such as Employ Milwaukee, Fuel Milwaukee, the Chambers of Commerce, and others who want to engage with Shorewood. The value of that is that if you're looking to hire, they can help disseminate the information. If you're interested in diversifying your interview panels, they have expertise in some of the hiring selections, and they could participate. If you want to infuse this community with a sense of equity and diversity and inclusion, then you have to be willing to involve people of marginalized communities in not just the conversations, but being able to participate in helping hopefully solve some of the issues. That for me is a more inclusive environment and a way of problem solving. So the cultivation of partnerships, new and old, internal to Shorewood and external, is critical. Creating a strategic action. This number 9 really talks about, as you create a plan, you can't be stuck with what you have. I can't say this is the plan and it can't change. It's open to your opinion. It's open to an evaluation of what the current times demand. And so we may be modifying things to make sure that the plan is what it needs to be. And then for me, something that's really important is this saying that you measure what's important, and if it's not important, you won't bother to measure it, and you probably won't bother to achieve it. So this idea of having an evaluation system, having a way to measure the progress, to ensure accountability, to initiate course corrections, and to validate achievements is important. And I'm hoping you're holding me accountable, because I want to be able to hold others accountable. To say, this is what we agreed to, this is the time frame, where are we at, and if we missed something, how do we improve? So the work plan process on page 3, the nuts and bolts implementation. My strategy is for Cairo, which I represent, to do as much of the groundwork as possible, in that you as a village have your priorities, you have your demands. The more groundwork, nuts and bolts that I can do, I think the more efficient the plan can be. So I'm talking about conducting individual and group meetings, meeting with the board and staff, working with the partners. When I talk about especially the external partners, developing a resource guidebook. So I think in one example, in the last meeting, the question was, will Leanne call me if she needs some information? Well, I hope that this guidebook will have information. So if Leanne and others need to identify certification process or identify something dealing with disadvantaged minority women-owned businesses, that there will be information in there that she will know to contact Lamont Robinson at the county for certain information. And so that you have something concrete that can be as a guide. And then if you need to call me, because it's a need for more information, definitely. But the idea is you don't need to be dependent on any one person to maintain this. So I'll do those kinds of things as well as working to develop strategic actions, priorities, and those kinds of things for at times you to take a look at and criticize. But I'm expecting that staff and board will be equally involved at times in developing or making recommendations or criticizing what we're doing. I was in a discussion this morning with the county, and there was a difference of opinion, and I had to make sure people know I feel good about debate and discussion. I grew up in a household where debate was encouraged and it was fun. So I encourage that with board and with staff, with residents. I think when we feel like we have to agree just to agree and get along, we miss some important components of what we're trying to do. So I may bring things to you and you may say, well, in a nice way, hopefully that's not going to work. I'll take it back and rework it, or I'll listen to your views and base the changes on what you have to say. As I mentioned, though, I've mentioned the board several times, and that's because your input is vital. And so I'm looking to work with primarily 3 groups, and that is the board, the executive team comprised of department heads, and the internal work group. Those are going to be the 3 main groups. There will be others, but with those 3 groups, I will be asking a series of questions. Are these the right areas to focus on? Are there other key issues to be focused on? The realistic timeline? What are the specific action steps? What are the expected outcomes? And who's accountable? And from those, then we will develop the work plan. Moving to the next page, I want to talk about work plan for strategic plan development. I think it can become somewhat confusing because we completed the environmental scan and it seems like we should be able to jump to a strategic plan. And in essence, we're doing that, but in a different type of method. We have the environmental scan. It informed us of many things. Now this work plan is in essence developing the strategic plan that will then be implemented. And then we will gauge and measure that strategic plan. And so what I provided was, I guess you could call it a Gantt chart that shows the many different specific areas of focus, from starting with the Board of Trustees in the meeting that we will have hopefully in the next month or so. We'll talk about goal setting and the vision and mission and the scope of the plan and policy implementation and all of those kinds of things. Hopefully also we'll talk about citizen committees because those are critical. Your committees that focus on housing and focus on other issues that relate to equity. I'm hoping that we involve them in the discussion of the strategic plan. The village administration, when we look at human resources practices, the purchasing, the contracting, all of those things, hopefully we'll be able to connect again with the police and talk about the community relations. besides those types of operations and processes and departments, I think it's critical that we talk about data management. That's something that I think I need to understand more, and I need to know how it effectively works in Shorewood, in the government, and is there room for improvement? So I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to say each of these specific areas of focus were identified intentionally to help us, one, have dialogue, two, set goals, and three, then dig down deeper, because each of one of these items, and I think there's probably 30 to 40 of them, will require specific action steps. So, in summary, as I mentioned earlier, I think planning is critical to us having a strategic plan, and a plan that we can implement and be proud of and achieve the goals that Shorewood has set. For me, the three areas that will indicate whether or not we're moving in an efficient manner are these: the board setting the foundation for plan implementation by establishing a vision, a mission, and goals. Second, the village implementing improvements to provide accessibility to and equity in its hiring process. And then third, the level of staff participation in developing a work plan that addresses workplace issues that impact diversity, equity, and inclusion. And before I conclude, just to show off a little my Cornell University education, when they talk about inclusion, they talk about community engagement, and they talk about it in three ways. They talk about psychological meaningfulness, which means, is that person a good fit for the job? Does that person have the competency, the knowledge to do the job? And there's a list of items. They talk about psychological safety. Does the person feel like they are valued and respected? Can they be their true self, their authentic self, or do they have to try to fit into a square when they don't really fit to be accepted? It talks about the issues that we talk about in diversity and inclusion, but do people feel safe? Do they feel like they'll be treated fairly in the environment? And then the third one is availability. Sometimes staff can feel like they're no longer psychologically available because they're stressed out, they're burnt out, their work-life balance is off. And so when we talk about community engagement, those are some of the things I will be talking about. The reason I mention that is because we want a staff that is engaged. We want a staff that is here, present, feels like the job is the right fit, feels like they can manage the stress, but just as much as those things are this idea of fairness, equity, and inclusion. Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like this is a safe place for them to be psychologically? And so those things make me excited about this strategic plan, along with all the other things I've mentioned. And so I, representing Cairo, appreciate this opportunity. I think we continue to have a positive movement forward to achieve your goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are not being asked for any action this evening, but if there are any questions, I'm sure we have a couple minutes for those. And if you think of questions afterwards, I'm sure you can email too.
I'll say briefly, I appreciate the detailed, outline of next steps and information that's in a way that's easy for me to digest from this position. I really also liked how you highlighted the idea of bringing in community stakeholders like the BID and the activist community and the citizen-led committees here in the village. And the other thing you highlighted was this idea of producing like a guidebook and a resource guide. And I think that's another great tool that came out of this. So thank you for all the work on that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Trustee Stokebrand.
Thank you for your work, Deborah.
Thank you.
So it looks like this will wrap up in September, and then it's a strategic plan to be implemented over the next 5 years. So our contract with you currently I believe it was 50,000 for the environmental scan and 20,000 through the end of September. Well, we will be done then with that part of it. Do you see us needing to do a new contract, or with the strategic plan, is this something that we can do with staff and elected and community?
I would say that you probably need a consultant. I feel a little weird in saying, yes, you need to hire me again, but I think it will become a key decision once we're in the middle of the work plan. Yes, I think you'll need me to help move, or Cairo to help you move forward. But you may find that, oh, the work plan is so well done. Deborah and we've all done such a fantastic job that it sort of is easy to move forward. What you're going to need, whether you hire Cairo or a consultant or not, is you're going to need a champion. You're going to need at least one person internally to say, this person is in charge of helping us move forward. This person is not going to do all the work, but they're going to keep track of what is done. They're going to remind people of their accountability. They're going to help the measurement. So you need someone. If you don't have at least a person who's the champion, or perhaps you will term that person as the project manager, my prediction would be that it will fall apart, because you're all busy. You all are going in a lot of directions. And so you need someone to help move it forward. And you may need, and the reason I say a consultant might be useful is you may need someone to also do those nuts and bolts things that you may not be able to find a person internally has that kind of time to devote. You're welcome.
And one of the things that we talked about is procedurally, we typically, when a strategic plan is developed, the board adopts it and then staff implements it. So it would be, we would do that with this plan as well. And to your point, there may be things that we need expertise on that we don't have. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to the next steps.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to special order of business 4B, next steps for public works facility discussions. So we have, as usual, we have all kinds of things. We have a memo from Manager Ewald. So I'll toss it over to you.
Great, thank you.
And there's no action on this, right? This is informational.
Correct. What I wanted to outline were some steps and where we're going to go next with this process. One of the things that was really helpful to hear from the board at our last meeting was the range and the desire for different levels of information. So in speaking with Barrientos last week, we talked about some of the information that the board was looking for, which is more than just estimated construction cost on a building, but bleeds into demo, environmental on the site, just a number of different things. So we brainstorm a list of what those are. We'd like to spend some more time trying to find out as much as we can for what we're expending at this point in time, and then come back to you within the next month to then share that information and then talk with you again about next steps. So within the scope of your packet, there's a brief outline. So it's modified our schedule just a little bit. We're continuing with our workshop for all of those in the audience who would like to attend, which is going to be on Thursday, March 23rd. From 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Public Works Department. It's going to be fabulous. If you'd like to come, we'd really welcome you to attend. And at that meeting, we will be talking about some layouts on the different sites that Barrientos has been looking at, but we're going to engage in some Q&A regarding questions and services. So following that, you are not going to hear from us on this project on April 3rd, but hopefully towards the end of April, beginning of May, depending on how agendas shuffle. We're hoping to come back with some information to the group. With that said, I also wanted to share that I really appreciated a lot of the comments that came in the questions really with regards to the transfer station from our last time together. And so tonight we wanted to review that information again, just so we could have some dedicated space to just hear on that particular topic. So if there are no additional questions for me, I'm actually going to pull up a PowerPoint and allow Leanne to go through just the history of that transfer station and how it interacts with our current services for yard waste, refuse, and leaf collection.
Any questions for Manager Ewald about the next steps and timeline? All right.
Can you repeat what time is the thing on Thursday? 5:30? Do I have that right?
5:30, doors open, 6 o'clock presentation, and the 7 o'clock close. But feel free to come at any point during that session. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I have a brief presentation regarding the transfer station services. Some of this will be a repeat of what we talked about the last time we had this
Leanne,
conversation.
I don't think we can hear you.
You're going
No.
to talk a little bit loud. I know your voice is.
Is this better?
Yes.
All right. So I'll hold it. Okay. All right. So this evening, we're going to review again some items and information related to the transfer station, particularly the services that are dependent on the ability to access a transfer station. So just a reminder, the transfer station is located in the northern part of our yard. It is composed of 2 compactors, an electronic pit scale, and then 2 pieces of equipment that are necessary for its operation, including a spotter and a front end loader.
It's a spotter again.
So the spotter is it's a vehicle that's used to move trailers, to move the 53-foot semi-trailers.
So it basically hooks up to a trailer, moves a trailer, hooks up to another trailer.
Correct.
It's not on the road.
That is correct. It is licensed for use on the road, but that is not how we use it. Just a reminder, a vehicle enters the yard. It rests on the scale, which is located immediately adjacent to our building. A gross weight is recorded by our administrative assistant. She waves them through, and then the truck will offload its material into one of the compactors, either refuse or yard waste, depending on the material that it is bringing in. That material then enters the compactor, and it is pushed or compacted into the waiting trailer. When all of the material is offloaded, the truck then returns to the scale. An empty weight is taken, and the difference determines the material tonnage that was brought into the yard. Our contracted hauler, Waste Management, then will transport the full trailers either to a landfill or the compost facility, depending upon the material involved. So all of our staff performed collection services are supported by the transfer station. That includes our residential curbside refuse collection, which is done to dwellings of 1 through 3 family units, and that service is performed weekly. Street and park refuse cans are collected twice per week. In season at water, those cans are emptied daily. What we term special collections, bulky items, furniture, etc., that's performed weekly. That's a fee-based service. Saturday residential dumping are open 20 times per year. So it's the first and third Saturdays from April through November, and the first Saturdays of December, January, February, and March. Curbside bagged yard waste collection is performed weekly in season, and that's April through November. That is just a note. Curbside bagged yard waste collection, we actually offer to all residential properties, not just the 1 through 3 families. So as long as the material is bagged, apartments or dwelling units of more than 3 families are eligible for that service. Curbside chipped brush collection is offered, actually that should say monthly, from April through November. And then vacuum leaf collection, which is our leaf collection, bulk leaf collection, is offered weekly in season. That season runs from the 3rd Monday in October through the 1st Friday of November. And that date schedule is set by ordinance. So current service level, which includes the items that are collected, the schedules that are set, and the frequency of collection, requires close and convenient access to a transfer station. So that would either be one that we own and maintain or one that was in a reasonable driving distance. Reasonable can be defined multiple ways, but please understand that that the length of that distance or the time involved in driving will have differing impacts on the services, the schedule, the frequency, due to the additional time that is necessary in a single day. That creates a bit of a domino effect in how much material we can collect in a day, how many days it takes to collect a given material, and then schedule impacts as we work that out. So transfer station access improves our collection efficiencies because we have a much shorter distance to take the collected material before we can empty it from our truck and get back out to get more material. It reduces fuel costs because if we're driving from one part of Shorewood to another part of Shorewood, obviously that is more fuel efficient than driving to any other distance. Sliding scale certainly would apply. And it extends vehicle and equipment life. The shorter the drive, obviously, the less wear and tear on the equipment and the vehicles. So this chart is included in your packet, and it's probably much easier to read in your packet, but the intent here is to, the left column, far left column would list the different types of services, and the intent is to provide information for the impacts of those services based on 3 scenarios. One being our own transfer station or access to one in very close proximity. The second would be no transfer station access, which means we're still providing the services, but we're driving them either to a vendor landfill or compost facility or to another transfer station operated by another entity that would include significant drive times. And the third option would be to contract the services to a private vendor. So you'll see under the transfer station access in close proximity, that is what I would consider to be the baseline, the current level of services. If we were to continue to provide those services with no close proximity access to a transfer station, you see the impacts here. Refuse collection would certainly continue weekly, but it would likely expand from the current 3 days to either 4 days or 5 days so that we can account for the drive time that would be necessary in the workday. There would likely be no special collections offered through village staff or the DPW. And I say likely because that would be somewhat dependent upon how the refuse collection schedule shook out and whether there was day or capacity in any weekday to provide that service. we would likely move to, we would likely move bagged yard waste to every other week in season rather than every week. Again, count for drive times. Brush collection. At this point, my response would be that that service, as we know it now, would likely be eliminated or significantly changed. We would probably move to a model which is not uncommon in other communities where brush would have to be bagged with yard waste, and anything larger than size restrictions or larger than could fit in the bag would have to be contracted with a private vendor or hauler to remove the larger material. And then bulk leaf collection. This isn't going to be a popular answer, but the realistic answer is we would have to move to bag leaf collection if we did not have a compactor or a transfer station compactor in close proximity. The reason for that is our current equipment, which as you know is new. It does not have a significant capacity in the box where the leaves are stored once they're collected. And we would likely spend as much time on the road transporting those leaves as we did collecting them in the first place, which bulk leaf collection is a pretty inefficient service to begin with, but that significantly compounds those inefficiencies. So from a realistic standpoint, without adding significant staff or additional equipment, we would, from a practical standpoint, be looking at eliminating loose leaf collection and moving to a bagged leaf model. And street and park cans, we would look at a way to work that into our service model so that service could continue. If we contract services to a private vendor, some things would remain the same. Obviously, we would continue weekly yard waste collection or weekly refuse collection. Special or bulky collections, most private vendors offer those, so those would continue as a fee-based service. The resident would make that arrangement directly with the contractor. Likely go to an every other week in-season model for yard waste. There would be no brush collection, no curbside brush chipped collection. What the conversations that we would have, the model that a vendor would offer would be the same as I described to you under our no transfer station access, which would be any smaller brush would be included in the bagged yard waste collection. Anything beyond that would likely be looked at as a solid waste or bulky collection. Contractor would not collect loose leaves. Leaves would have to be bagged under a contracted services model. And we could certainly contract for street and park can collection. I have TBD here because the frequency would be to be determined based on that contract model. So again, just the footnote at the bottom of the page is that this is really based on our current services as a baseline. If we did not have close proximity access to a transfer station, we could continue to offer at the same frequency level of service, but it would involve additional staff and or additional equipment to be able to provide that frequency that we have now. I think that's it, right?
Any questions? Trustee Ursink?
And just if you could remind us what would happen if we go to contracted services or no transfer station, would we lose employees? Oh, what scenario are we losing employees in?
So I think that would have to be part of a larger conversation. I don't know that it is one we've had recently, but some of you have been on the board when we have had discussions regarding winter operations. Our staff size in the Department of Public Works right now really is sized for optimal winter operations. We have added and maintained services that work around that model based on the capacity in non-winter months. If we were to eliminate any type of collection services, right now we have 3 employees. That is their primary and almost exclusive job responsibility. So that would reduce our staff size to 16 from what is currently budgeted and funded. That would, if that were a scenario we were to review, my recommendation to you then would be we would also have to open a larger conversation about service levels for winter operations, because at 16 we could not we could not offer or maintain the current level of winter services that we do. That staffing level would simply be too small.
Trustee Kudo.
Would it be possible to get sort of comps for services with other North Shore communities? But I have had a hard time. We've never had contract services here that I know of. So like, I've never lived in Waukesha or wherever where they would have those types of services. But being able to look at, what Whitefish Bay does, or what Fox Point or Bayside, just as sort of a comp of what they do, what they offer. Some of them might contract services out, some of them don't. Some of them have transfer stations, some of them don't. I'm just trying to get a better sense of how all other places work and,
Sure.
and what it looks like. I think would be helpful, at least as we go forward.
Would you be looking, do you have a specific grouping in mind? Or you want to start with the North Shore communities,
If
or
it was just something that was similar, North Shore communities that were similar to this, or like, you're the experts.
Mhm.
Leave it to you to find the comps, but if, Oak Creek or South Milwaukee, Cudahy, however they do it, I would be interested to see. And this is a nice, clear graph, so that I would be interested, I think, similar to this with those other communities, if we could,
sure.
please.
Yes, we can definitely provide that information.
Would, we can, well, one of the things that I would wonder is once we have that information in front of us, then it's not a direct comparison. So for example, Whitefish Bay doesn't have alleys and they don't have street parking, so they could do an automation that, we referenced in the 2018 study that wouldn't work in Shorewood. So I don't know if you want, and like comparable population or number of households or things like that. Would that
I would
be-
leave it to.
Yeah.
Comp.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I think we would definitely start with the other 6 North Shore communities, and then probably reach out for information to communities who have a similar development pattern.
Mhm.
So a West Allis, a Wauwatosa communities, on a grid with alleys.
Yeah, I'm not on a walk this.
Yeah.
So, but I.
I guess that's what, like in real estate comps, I just want to be clear about what we are looking for as comps.
You feel like.
Is that clear?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know what I at this moment would intend to provide, and
Okay.
you always have the, the option to say, well,
not what we
not
want.
Sounds
really
like
what we
we're on the
want.
same page.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. That's all that's what I wanted to do. Okay. Other questions, Trustee Stokebrand?
Oh, I guess the thing that keeps coming back to me is we're looking at doing a 50-year plan for our public works. And we keep looking at the current situation. And I guess what I feel like I'm missing here is, where is the future? I guess in a perfect world, we would do a lot more recycling. We would recycle clothes, we'd recycle shoes, we wouldn't haul as many leaves, we'd leave them on our lawn. Is there any way to bring the future into this instead of the status quo? We can't make the world recycle more. the plastic situation is terrible. I just wonder if we're doing the forward thinking here that we should be doing for 50 years. And how do we do that? When, it's, the options just don't seem to be where we'd all like them to be. I mean, I think I've read a little bit about extended something recycling, which is the closed piece. So like, let's talk about, so we have this drop-off recycling place where we can bring TVs and everything, right? Does everybody else have this? Are we the only one in the North Shore? Or like, could we be a leader here and say to MMSD, we're rethinking public works for the next 50 years. What can we do together instead of us going alone? Maybe we need the bigger site so we can collect TVs from the North Shore. I mean, will MMSD pay us for that? Maybe we can turn this into some revenue. I just feel like I'm looking at status quo here, and it's not what I would be doing a good fiduciary responsibility. My other question was, I know we talked about for events, the event fee, hiring, I think it was the company called Riverworks or something that's going to pick up garbage. Was that something suggested by Public Works? No, I thought there was some, when we were looking at the
The bid
special,
had utilized that service.
pardon me?
The bid.
The bid,
Yeah.
okay. Found a vendor to pick up garbage on the weekend, and I'm like, could we get them to do that at Atwater? Could we hire that company to also, because the Public Works doesn't work on the weekend, so could we hire them to pick up garbage at Atwater? And when I see street park can collection, let's go out for bids and see, what it would cost. I mean, I think that would be a noticeable change at that area in the summertime. If we could have garbage picked up every Saturday morning, I'm, maybe 2024 budget.
Other questions, comments? I had just a question came up about sort of efficiencies, and when we use the word efficiency, when we talk about a new facility that would allow for optimal operations and not having to back everything out in order, we talk about that in terms of efficiency. But is there a way, are we projecting that it would create so much efficiency that it would be like found time that we would be able to do something else or forecasts and apply that found time to operational levels or something?
From my perspective, I don't believe we're talking about efficiencies where we suddenly find 2,000 man hours a year, right? But I will say that I believe we can be more efficient in our daily work and daily tasks if we can eliminate some of the built-in challenges that we have from the current buildings and layouts. Where I see us using that found time is to continue the maintenance of these 100-year-old systems that we have. We are perennially playing catch up on pruning. We have multiple inspection, maintenance, and exercising tasks that are required of our water distribution and sewer collection systems that we do our very best to meet and achieve established goals, but do not always. I think perhaps a prime and classic example is we spend a lot of time maintaining everybody's building but our own. Because our building does not tend to be a public facing building. And I think if there is more time in work days, there are a lot of maintenance items that we can give better attention to do a better job of on, and also meet or go a long way to meeting some of the goals that we have established for ourselves on systems maintenance.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Yes.
I just want to say you guys do a wonderful job with what you have. So thank you for
Thank you.
doing that and knowing the conditions of those facilities. You guys are really going above and beyond. So really appreciate the hard work you guys do.
If one more thing with the comparables, I think that is a great request, Trustee Kudo, and I really appreciate it. For the municipalities that have contracts, sort of confirming that they have a 1-800 number, like what level of customer service they have with their contracts. And I know, for instance, I live in a 6-unit, multi-unit building that has waste management, and the contract is, we have 2 carts for 12 people, and it's once a month pickup, and the landlords gets fined if the cart lid isn't down tight, like if it's a little bit overloaded. And if they get behind, then, it gets off schedule. And so then the garbage, is next to it and they don't pick up that garbage. So just those types of things, and they also have it for the recycling. And if they get off schedule, it's the same thing. If the lid is not all the way down, if it's overpacked, they won't empty the recycling at all. So the landlord has to come over and take out recycling and dispose of it himself. So those are the types of things with contracts to just be really clear about, what that is. Great. And then, oh, yes.
I just wanted to mention, when we toured the Brown Deer facility, I don't know who was all there. I believe the Brown Deer Public Works director said they're quite pleased with waste management. Waste management does their refuse collection, but to allow for that winter operation, they have their staff do mowing in the summer. So we currently farm out our mowing. We outsource that. Now, obviously Brown Deer has a lot more park space than we do, but we also, I think you'd have to look at it creatively. If you decided to go with waste management, what else could the staff do so we could keep our winter operations? Maybe you could outsource, not outsource some other things. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I just think it would, in addition to hoping that we could see the staff looking to the future, I would also like to see these studies. Many of them talk also about the alternate service delivery and, a public developing timelines for metrics. And I know we talked about this last time, and apparently at a certain point in the past, a village trustee indicated it wouldn't be necessary. But I mean, I just went through 4 studies today. The one from Sigma, I think there's one from Springstead 2010 talks about the need to provide data to manage workload and how services are delivered. That was a recommendation. It was a recommendation in the 2013 strategic plan, regularly review services for efficiencies, benchmarks for regular tasks, provide those to the board. And so I guess I would like to see that kind of data that would help us make these decisions about services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so correct. It wasn't one trustee, it was a committee that made that recommendation. So it occurs to me that I really like all these ideas. Of course, we need to envision the future, and there probably is, there are different ways that we can do things. And I'm wondering procedurally, obviously that would be a policy discussion, and I'm wondering if it would be part of our next strategic visioning. Our 2025 plan is almost up. So we'll be starting that, and that would be a time when we would be able to, because I don't think that, to be fair, I mean, I think ideally it would be great.
To build a $50 million facility, maybe.
Right. But that isn't, I mean, I wouldn't.
Too late?
Well, to be fair, that isn't necessarily that's not the scope of what we are looking at right now. Agree or disagree. But to create that opportunity in the future, I support that idea. And I think that we have an opportunity coming up. So I think we are done with this item and we can move on to 4D. Are we on that? Sorry, I have so many. Is it 4D? Barrientos, next item? Okay.
Good evening. We're here to update you and on the garage study. We're actually going to talk more about what we're going to present to the community workshop this Thursday. And then we're going to talk about cost as well and some items that can be done in another phase following this concept level. So we're at the board meeting today, and as I mentioned, the next and third and final workshop is this coming Thursday. So we're going to talk about a little bit what we're going to show there. First, next slide is the survey, which we talked about at our last meeting, in which the overall 65% of the community members who responded expressed support for reusing the garage for something else, or using Morris Boulevard site for something else besides the Public Works garage, and that there's other higher, better uses for the site. And that they felt a bit of creativity should be applied to what could be developed here, what the future for this site could be. So at the last board meeting, it was decided to eliminate the Holton Avenue site. So that one we deemed was too large. There's a large structure, a lot of demolition costs involved in that, and it's not listed for sale. So we have dropped that from the site right now, or from the study. We did the matrix again. I'm showing you these because this is what we're going to show the community, the matrix, which we rated all the sites by the criteria that we had discussed. So that put Vienna on the top. And the next site is really what this is. We're not talking so much about that site, but it's the different options that we've been exploring to date. Get my page up here. So I'm actually going to have Josh Cook come up here and Josh and start talking. We're going to talk about the different levels, the assessments that we've done on each of the sites, and in terms of engineering, their infrastructure, their zoning, and also look at some initial design massing so you can see the size of this facility and kind of character that it'll have, and then the cost estimates. So we're going to talk about that. And so you're starting to see some renderings, which we'll talk about. These are quick, more massing studies to show relationships to the overall site on that. So moving on to the next part, we've got we're going to go through the different sites. And what we did on each of the sites, to be specific, as we move now into conceptual planning, is we're looking at the contours of the site. We're looking at least the sites that are bordered by streets, what the grade levels are as where we propose to have curb cuts, driveways into the site, and then looking at the site overall, where we're going to put the main building, how high it would be in relation to the curb, because we want to maintain a gentle slope down from the floor of the main building down to the curb. We don't want to go up, and we don't want to go down too steep either. So, and we started thinking about how we're going to move water around. We're going to put the swales around. So we started looking at that. We looked at any site structures that would be needed to retain earth. Of course, at Morris Boulevard, we have started looking at and actually costed that out to a concept for replacing the whole retaining wall and there. Stormwater management in general, based on engineering input from your municipal engineer, Strand Engineering, we, our associates, we've been informed that MMSD rules are that we'll have to have retained that is stored on stormwater. And most of the sites do not have enough room for an open retention pond, so we're going to have to go with vaulted stormwater detention, which is done quite a bit in urban settings. And so utilities, most of those are in the right-of-ways around them. Some of them don't come onto the site, given their history of these buildings, so that'll have to be done. And then we looked at adjacent roadways and any easements, like utility easements that might be on there. So,
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Please? So the stormwater management, would that be, so it would stay in a basin with a non-permeable
here we are. Yeah.
until it, you would release it out slowly, or would have a permeable base? Or would it be permeable and go back in the water table? Or when you talk about that stormwater management, so all the water from the parking lot would go into a
vault under, and the solids would float down, and so we would minimize total solid suspension in that, and so and it flow out into the city's stormwater system. I'm not sure about the permeable basin. You're asking a question I don't know. If we had our engineer, I could respond to that.
So that would apply to the Vienna site also?
Yes, right. Mm-hmm. We were going to talk about the individual sites. I think is that up again?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have Josh talk about the individual sites.
Yeah, so since last time, we basically took all of our plans and sites and took them to a little bit more of a conceptual level. In these levels, at drawings, we have more site features and information. We have things like overhead door pads, target elevations, easements, describing where the retaining wall would be, where fencing would be, and also including the building rooms layout on all of these sites. I won't go over the basic like ideas behind each site as we have previously, but I will talk a little bit about how it's going to affect the public and how the services may change. So for this one, as you guys know, it would have no transfer station. So to maintain the existing levels of collection services, an alternate transfer station would have to be needed, whether that would be a separate service or a different site. That would have to be considered for this option. This is looking at the site if we reused it to be able to split between two different sites. Recycling would have to be available to the general public on Saturdays, and the compactor would stay on here. All other services for the main garage will be moved to a proposed new site.
Just a question, is this the one plan that would retain some of those historic buildings at the current use?
Yes, that is correct, but they would be used for DPW operations.
And there'd be nobody on site?
Yeah, the staffing would have to be managed. This is looking at Holton with the proposed purchase of the lower parcel as well. This is having all the services on one site. So a lot of the services would remain the same, and they would be maintained. The only difference is that they're across the river. So a 4-minute drive would have to be taken to get to this site.
Can you remind me, is that lower portion for sale as well, that lower parcel?
No, we would have to go to the owner and talk to them. And then this is on East Vienna Avenue. So this as well has 2 extra parcels. One of them is a complete parcel on the southeast, and then the northwest would be a partial easement of that. And this is similar to the North Holton site. All the services are on the same site, so things like the transfer station would remain, and collection services would be maintained to the existing services they are right now.
And again, same question as the last parcel, as the last option?
Yeah, neither of those are for sale besides the main East Vienna property.
Thank you.
And what's the distance from Capel and Oakland to the Vienna site in miles? I've
It's
seen 4 minutes, but what is it in?
I think it's like around 1.5. So
Okay, because the nearest transfer station, I believe, is 8 miles. Is that? I got an email from Leanne. the Milwaukee side is 8 miles. Yeah.
Here is a preliminary rendering of the proposed building on the East Vienna. This is looking from the corner of North Fratney Street and East Vienna, kind of looking southwest. So typically in a lot of our garages, things like the repair garage, the heated parking, all that will be precast, but administration and crew areas, we really have a chance to do some architectural design elements. So this is just what we were coming up with preliminary. Obviously, if we took this further, we could have a lot of design options and routes, but I think this encases generally what things can turn out to look like.
Yeah, if I can add into, there's a few design features you're starting to see come to light that we've talked about. The building needs to be set back about 100 feet from the street, from the curb line. And that's to allow the trucks, as you can see, that one truck exiting so that has room to maneuver or turn, or maybe wants to turn around and go back into the site. Around the repair garage, which you're seeing off to the left, that to the trucks, you can see the back there, there's a truck approaching, the door is there. And it may want to turn or S-turn into one of the overhead doors. And then typically we do buffer them with employee parking in front of what is the crew area in the office, or it's visitor parking. So this is kind of a prototypical design in your future. So you're seeing kind of the spacing on the site, at least from the street side. This is the public side. And then you're also seeing how tall those buildings are, the repair garage being as up to high as 35 feet on the roof there. And then the parking garage is about 30 feet. So it's a larger industrial size building. And then, so Josh will go, we have other images.
Yeah, if you want to move to the next image, I think it shows these elements a bit better too. So you can actually see the program and how it's actually laid out. The transfer station on that parcel over there, you can see how that would operate, and then also fencing. So the administration and crew, all of them are going to be separate from the actual yard. Services and storage in the back, which are going to be fenced off, where we're going to have tempered storage and salt shed. So a little more safety back there, so things are actually blocked off. But you can see also see the height of all the program elements and kind of how they fit in with the existing buildings of the area, and kind of that industrial zoning that's already been there.
And where would like the drop off be? Weekend drop off?
Oh, like drop off? I think I notate that better on the floor plan, but it's kind of sort of by that transfer station area. It definitely can be moved wherever the staff would feel it's best put, but to keep it outside of that fence area, I kept it there so people aren't constantly going in the yard.
Does it has to be, stuff has to be stored under a roof, right? Can't leave that stuff outside like TVs and stuff, right? Or no?
Yeah, I believe so. Things like that can be stored on a roof. We could use some sort of like small canopy structure there. I think that would suffice. This is looking at if the facility was to be rebuilt at the existing site. You could see that it needs to be 2 stories. So administration and crew would be upstairs, and they would be above the trades and services shop. If you want to move to the next slide, we can start to see some of the issues that are going to arise if we do build a building on this current site, especially where the fuel station is, next to the wash bay. That'd be on the east side. So you can see the retaining wall, and then we're just kind of pinching this site right here. So there's a lot of blind corners where trucks are going to be turning around. It's a lot of risk for accidents when there's types of corners like that on these sites. If you want to move to the next slide, we can see what the building would pose on the Oak Leaf Trail. So some of these buildings are upwards of 30 to 36 feet tall, and that's just a big wall of precast on a recreational trail. So from an urban design aspect, I don't think that would be really ideal. I think this showcases that as well. And you can also see the size difference between the houses and this actual building. So I think that would be a very interesting backyard for some of these people, to say the least.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, so for cost, we're showing you, focusing on the main building cost first, which is on all the sites, it's about the same size, 47,000 square feet. So we want you to focus on is the main building, whether it's on Holton or I should say, yeah, Holton or Vienna, is going to be the same cost. Maybe utilities will be different. So, but the main building, that program with the garage, yes?
And if it's on Morris?
That's another story.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Yeah, because we got a 2 stories and
Leaving it out.
elevator. Yeah.
Is this in the packet?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I actually don't recall this.
This was updated and emailed out, so there's new.
Oh,
Written side.
146 for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, we actually did reach out to a construction management firm, Kraus Anderson, and they have done a lot of our garages and other public works garages, and their cost estimator developed a detailed breakdown, which we went through with them, and they made various assumptions at a large scale based on the concept plans. They know it's precast. They've done a lot of garages, so they know it's going to be certain height. But we don't have a lot of detail on the plans yet, like how many windows or doors. And so they made a lot of allotments, budget numbers. Okay, we know generally this kind of buildings cost this much square foot. And they went through the repair garage, the parking garage, the crew areas, and came up with a cost per square foot. And then they added on their own general conditions, their markups, design fees, and that. So that's for the building. A few notes on that is Barrientos and Kraus Anderson, we bid out garages every year. And what we've seen since, like I'll take our Pewaukee Municipal Service Garage that was bid out 18 months ago. In 18 months, we went and talked to the contractor about his costs. And that contractor also looked at Kraus Anderson's number and felt, yeah, that number is right. Or in general, in scale, there's some large assumptions they're making. And they said, since we bid out the Pewaukee project in summer of 21, there's been a 15 to 20% increase. So, that's a fifth more. It's not plateaued, I'm going to say, but it's not accelerating like that. But there was a huge tick up in 21 and into 22. So we of course, we were wondering why it had gone up, and so we were checking our sources on that. And of course, you all know there's supply chain and material shortages going on. So as I said, this is just the building. We do not include in here cost for demolition, site grading, and the transfer station, the site purchase, or environmental hazardous materials management on that. That's going to vary by site. The other buildings, the temper storage building, which will handle or hold a lot of the seasonal construction equipment and trucks, as well as bulk materials. That is coming in at 1.67 million. The salt shed is at 570,000, and then the fuel station at 300,000. So all of those buildings, yard buildings, as we refer to them, is at 2.5 million. Yep.
Going back to President Biggs' question, so this is for the 2 sites in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You said the Morris site was a different story, but I don't see the story. So.
Yeah. Did we?
Kind of our next step.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot more to define Morris cost. It's just we'll talk about it in our next one here coming up.
Okay.
Could you go over what's GSF?
Gross square foot.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed one of our previous studies talked about a pole build fleet versus all new versus remodel. Is that a different
A pole barn or a
pole build?
A pole building is something, it's like an agricultural building. It wouldn't,
Never mind.
yeah, it doesn't have a slab.
I have a question.
Oh,
And this is, I think it's a little to Trustee Stokebrand's point about being forward looking, but have we explored yet? I don't know if this is for you or Rebecca, but what elements of this construction might qualify the village for tax rebates under the Inflation Reduction Act?
I've heard of that, and I have a consultant on another project that's familiar with that, but we don't have them engaged on this project, and it's not part of my scope. I am going to go check in on that other project and see where they're looking at where we can get some IRA funding, but I don't know more about it.
I think it looks like Manager Ewald is making a note.
Great
So,
idea.
Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, so that would just be, we'd have to expend them by 2026 or anyway, we'll get all the guidelines.
Okay.
So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So we're going to have the workshop on Thursday. We're going to present this data, everything we just showed you, get their input or feedback. Hopefully they'll, as they have, they'll comment via email to us. And we'll come back. I guess we're coming back in May or sometime later now and give you more direction. What we planned to do is propose, and I maybe Rebecca, you can help me on this, at what point we want to do preliminary. I will say this though, that there's a next step obviously is to define all this. As I mentioned, this is the concept plan. We've done initial site assessment as well as engineering elements, but based on our discussions with the staff and just reviewing the costs, it's very apparent that the contractor and even us are like, we're making some very large assumptions. We're not defining a lot on the plans. So for the Morris site, we made some assumptions on that retaining wall. It's going to be sheet piling, which is basically a steel corrugated sheet pounded in and tied back, and it's red and it looks kind of rusted, corrosive. And but that was the most inexpensive thing they could think of, pounded in. And they had a cost they came up with near $1 million for that, just the most inexpensive retaining wall. But it's not really designed for the footings, we don't have the soil. We haven't engineered the tiebacks. Maybe concrete would be better. That's the next step. We have to evaluate different construction assembly and figure out which one's the best for the building. So obviously, I mentioned we don't have the cost yet for the site, the stormwater and environmental. We don't have a lot of soil information at this point. So the next step in the preliminary design would be to define this further so the village can get a tighter cost on this. And also what I find is it would give us another chance to talk to public works staff and okay, let's look at this shop. Let's look at this layout. Is this really work for you guys? Could we move it around, maybe combine some places? So there'd be another level of design iteration on this as well and for design. And we would look at the zoning issues, talk with the city, either the alderman or DCD, perhaps even city engineering, and see what they think about the curb cuts and utilities. If need be, make a phone call to We Energies about a transformer, and get, I could say, another level of reality onto this, because we're making a lot of assumptions on this cost. But that was the scope. That is the extent of our work at this point, is to broadly define your opportunities on these sites and what are some advantages and what are some limitations. And I think at this point, I feel like we've identified what we can identify. Okay, we know we got to get into that environmental pot there and get into the grading. So we're at that stage of, okay, these are the next things we've got to define more. And we basically, for costs, we put an allotment based on our industry experience.
So by pursuing that process, we would, once that's compiled, we would presumably be able to look at the options that are on the table and sort of get a sense of how they compare price-wise and where the costs are. And even though some sites are going to have costs that other sites don't have, they'll all kind of jigger out, and then we can see what we're, are we comfortable with any of it, and at that point, is the appetite gone? Or B, of those, what do we want to prioritize and move forward with first for preliminary design and see where that goes? Is that kind of?
Yes, that's a good summary of that.
And I would say for the village board, I think if you have a sense of what you're going to need, we're taking this extra time to collect information based on conversations that we've had. If you have a sense of like what you're going to need just to prioritize which site to move forward with preliminary design first, please communicate that to Manager Ewald so that we're moving in that direction. I mean, that's my goal, is to have information so that we might not be comfortable with it. We might not like the cross, whatever, but that we're ready to sort of give some direction for this preliminary design step. Understanding that there are all a lot of pieces that have to fall into place. Okay. So, great. Is there anything else you need from us?
No, I'm complete.
Any questions that have not been covered in the presentation this evening? Okay. Are there any members of the public that would like to be heard on this matter or have questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that takes us through special order of business, I believe.
The Trustee McCaig or President McCaig?
Yes.
Could we just take 5 minutes bathroom break?
Yeah, I was going to go in that direction. I just wanted to make sure that we were. All right, so we have consent agenda coming up, and then citizens to be heard before new business. So I would would everybody like a quick break or take care of the consent agenda?
Do you want to do those two things first and then?
Yeah.
And then stop before new business?
Yep.
That would be great. All right, so moving on to item 5, consent agenda items. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Ursink, seconded by Trustee Stokebrand. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda has been accepted as presented. Item 6, we don't need. Items removed from consent agenda, there are none. Item 7, public hearings, there are none this evening. Item 8, citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda. Discussion may follow, comment on non-agenda items. A discussion may come at future meetings. Are there any citizens who would like to be heard this evening? Yes, please come to the microphone, say your name and address.
Hi, good evening. Ellen Ekman, 2500 East Beverly Road in Shorewood. Nice to see all of you. And I could talk for a long time, but I know I only have 3 minutes.
We do try to stay to 3 to 4 to 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll be more. As all of you know, we have on the April 4th. Oh, I'm coming to speak to you as both a citizen, of course, and also a citizen member of the school board. So I'm not speaking for the school board. I'm just here to just give you a little sense of what is on the agenda and some very minor information. There on the election of April 4th, there will be a.
You have to talk right.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
on the April 4th election, which is coming up very soon, there is the residents of our village will be voting on a non-recurring referendum question. And approved referendum would provide the school district with an additional $5.5 million in each of the next 5 years to cover key funding needs, including preserving student programs, student services, and retaining and attracting talented staff at all levels. We did not take this request lightly. We debated this and talked about it over a series of time as things got more and more difficult in terms of lack of funding and lack of support from the state. and I'm sure if you've been watching closely about what's coming out of the state legislature, a refusal in the last biennium to fund or increase education, the state returning money to the school districts across the state. They kept, despite increasing costs and despite lots of other things. Not only did they not increase the per pupil amount of money, they, well, I don't know if they decreased, but over time, the amount of money coming from the state to support special education went from a level of about 80% to a level of about 40%. We have to make up the difference. Every student with a special need who is a resident of the school district, regardless of what school they attend, receives special ed services from the school district. So this goes above and beyond just our enrollment, it's larger. All right, so that was the problem. The schools, as you know, because I know that you have children in the schools or you had children in the schools, they are the heart of our community. And the success of our community and the success of our village is dependent on the success of our schools. If we want our village to continue to be attractive and bring residents in, we need to have strong school systems. And we have many, many parents who talk to us about, oh, we chose here. We know that the costs are different, but we wanted these schools. So now we have to make sure we can maintain the schools to the high achieving, attractive school district that we have been and that we wish to continue to be. Then we want to serve students. We want to serve residents because our school buildings do serve residents in terms of all kinds of recreation department events and school events. And we want to serve our own staff. And I think most of you would agree, our property values are tied to the success of our schools. So we come to you, or I come to you to say, we took this seriously and we take it seriously. We have been out talking to community members in all kinds of places. In fact, show and tell, I'm sure you've received 2 flyers. They're very, very detailed. I don't have to read them to you. You can read them. And if you have questions about them and you have questions about any part of the referendum, there's 2 places to do it. Tomorrow night, there is a virtual forum. You can find out how to link into the virtual forum by going to the Shorewood School District website. And then at the front of the website, it says operating referendum. There's a tab. You go into that and it'll tell you how to go to the virtual under engagement. Also, there's a section called frequently asked questions. And we have taken a great deal of time to answer all kinds of questions, all the ones you're thinking about right now, that because this isn't a time of question and answer, you can go right in there, right while I'm talking, you can look it up and there's your answer. How did we get to this? Almost a fiscal cliff, but it's there. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it that you've seen in this thing, the flyers. All the Wisconsin school districts we operate under a revenue limit. We have a revenue limit that has been established by state funding systems. It caps the amount of money that the district can receive through state aid and through local property taxes. So it's capped. So we can't, that's it. That's all you got. All right. And then if you don't get state aid, well, you're capped unless you go out for a referendum. Districts are turning to referendum for a lot of reasons, most of them tied to inflation and declining state funding. There are 52 school referendums on the April 4th ballot all across the state. In the fall, I forgot to write down the number. There are probably 70 to 80. Since 1992, 82% of Wisconsin school districts have pursued an operating referendum. That should tell you that there's something wrong with our funding formulas in the state. And the individuals, districts have to make determinations and go back out to their residents. So that's where we're at. Clearly, you know that inflation has outpaced revenue. We're facing the same issues in the school as the villages. You're also have received less money from the state, and you're looking closely at legislative. Are they going to start giving you shared revenue? Well, we want them to give more money to the schools too. They got a lot of money right now, I understand, in the state legislature. So it'd be nice. Shorewood school districts per pupil revenue caps have lagged inflation by about $3,200 per student since 2009. So it's just getting bigger and bigger. last year's budget, the district reduced expenditures by over 1 million. And in doing it, we still wanted to maintain the compensation and benefits that our teachers have asked for and that we value. And we had to absorb the cost elsewhere. We cut essentially, all right, so this isn't a surprise. 82% of the budget is for staff. 82%. That's teachers and every other staff, from the coaches to the custodial staff to everything else. So 82%. So you can do the math. If you have to cut $1 million or $2 million, where do you cut?
Thank you very much.
All right. So I'll just say one more thing.
Okay.
We appreciate, one, that you're listening to me, and two, so many of you have been concerned and have reached out to us. So if you have any other questions, if you want any other information, please reach out, and we need to support our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other citizens who would like to be heard this evening? Okay, no one here, no one online. All right, with that, I will give you all a 4-minute bio break. Is that what you want?
Thanks.
Okay. All right, guys, it's 9:20. Let's do it. So we're now moving on to new business. Item 9A, Police Department update of activities and next steps for organizational study review. We have an extensive memo in our packet. This is for our update only, no action required. Chief Worth, how would you like to approach this?
Thank you. Well, I did not do a pretty PowerPoint presentation, and I apologize for that. But there are a couple things that I'd like to highlight of this. Shortly after I became the chief, I presented a 30, 60, 90 to 120-day plan. Many of the items on this memo are follow-ups to that and some of the successes that we've seen. But also it's a continual review process of the things that we're doing in the police department and continued areas of refinement that we can look at. I know the Weiss study is recommendations are first and foremost in everybody's mind, as they are mine. And we are continually looking at the remaining recommendations for the Weiss study. And there will be 2 upcoming soon with a date to be determined tentatively in May, but that's what we're looking at. And then the remaining recommendation for the Weiss study sometime probably Q3, Q4 next year, sometime depending on how things go. All of the documents related to the Weiss study, when they've been completed, and the history are all documented and published on the department's website. I've linked them on this document so you can take a look at them. One of the things that I really wanted to focus on in the police department was training, understanding that there's a need. There's a continual need in law enforcement for training to stay abreast of best practices and making sure that our officers are getting the best and newest training out there. And it's not just for operational, but it's for some of the other skills, fair and impartial policing, the crisis intervention training, communications, public information messaging, leadership development for our sergeants, and Captain Santiago is there now at a leadership training, but also de-escalation training. And this is one thing that I'm particularly proud of, that we've had a number of officers go to de-escalation training. One was held in Iowa and the other one was up north. The ICAT training is a best practice by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Police Executive Research Forum. And ICAT is integrating communications, tactics, assessment, and communication. So it really just gives us options into de-escalation, especially with unarmed individuals. So that's definitely something that we would like to continue in the police department. But we have 3 trainers in de-escalation strategies right now. Some of the other trainings that we're looking at is just all of our typical training items that we require, that are required by us to maintain certification, firearms, vehicle operations, professional communications, those types of things. And we're going to continue to seek out crisis intervention training. And then we're working with the Department of Justice to bring a dynamics of officer and citizen encounters to Shorewood. And we would be the host agency for Milwaukee County or southeastern Wisconsin. That's one of the things that we're really proud about as well in the police department, is becoming a host site for multiple training opportunities. We had Milwaukee County in to address homelessness. We had crisis intervention training. We had public messaging, media training, and really looking at how we can best utilize that community room at the police department and be a premier agency for some of those training opportunities. One of the other things that we're continually working on in the police department, and I look forward to working more closely with Captain Santiago when he returns, is continuing to develop our communications plan, our strategy to how we best communicate what's occurring in the police department and what's transpiring in the village. If there's crimes that occur, how do we best message that to all the staff and trustees and to the public as well? So we're looking at a completion of our communication strategy probably in about Q3. It's not as simple as just saying, here's what we're going to say and when we're going to say it. There's so many other things that have to come into play, things that include confidentiality and open records and those types of things. So I know Deborah talked a little bit about community engagement and some of the things that the police department could do. And I'm really proud of our levels of community engagement since I was appointed chief. We've taken every opportunity that we could to get out into the public, to attend every event that we are invited to. Some of the events we weren't necessarily invited to, but happened to stop by, or we had assignments because they were large events, street closures and those types of things. But that's something that is really an emphasis for me to our officers, is engaging maybe in not so formal settings, but the informal settings as well. My message to the officers is that they need to make contributions. Now, I don't define that contribution because everybody has a certain niche. Maybe it's traffic stops, maybe it's business checks, maybe it's park checks or bicycle patrol, but everybody will make contributions to the success of this agency. And I think that really bears out in some of the things that we've done and I've been able to highlight here in this memo. And I think it really bears fruit as well with the morale of the department. And I know I briefly touched on it, or maybe I didn't, but I've been meeting with the officers. And one of the things that I hear continually from them is their request to be involved in community events, to be more participative out with the residents in the village. And when I was asking them about some of the core values that are important to them, community and service were by and large the two greatest core values that I heard from all of the officers. And what was important to them. Now, we know that it's important to the village, right? But it's important to the officers. And I think that really aligns with your expectations of them, my expectations of them, but the expectations and the desires that they have for themselves. So I'm not going to go over all the numbers, but you can take a look at them. The numbers of bike patrol, the business checks, vacation checks, park checks, all the things that we've done. Just want to touch a little bit about the levels of collaboration that we have as well with the police department, with our outside agencies, particularly with the Milwaukee Police Department and the University of Wisconsin Police Department. We meet weekly, receive crime bulletins because we know that crime knows no borders. So we have crime that traverses into Milwaukee. Conversely, Milwaukee crime traverses into Shorewood. So those levels of communication are really important for us to be able to solve some of the crimes and to be communicative and collaborative with our outside entities in the event that we need assistance or information or investigative support. All of our collaborations with the North Shore remained constant and very cooperative as well. Particularly with Whitefish Bay as they're our direct neighbor. But we meet monthly with Milwaukee County police chiefs and then also with the North Shore Police Chief agencies. The things that we're looking at continuing to do, process improvements, how to continually refine our expenditures for overtime, staff evaluations. We're looking at refining the way that we're evaluating our personnel to make it more meaningful, to make it more robust, to set goals, and so that they have also input into the things that they're doing and the things that they want to do. And then just a continual review of the standard operating procedures, which is not only required, but necessary for continual updates. If you recall, we do use Lexipol, which provides us with best practices, and some of those need to be refined, but we continually get updates from Lexipol. So it is an ongoing process and not something that will stop throughout my entire tenure as the chief. So happy to answer any questions.
It was remarkable how quickly you went. Trustee Marbalda.
Yeah, thank you for this. This was really a wonderful update to see. I'm just curious, this topic came up in another, for me, and with another hat I wear, which is serving as a survivor representative on the Governor's Council on Domestic Violence. And, the concern about trauma experienced by officers and mental health. And I'm just wondering kind of like, where are we as a village in terms of having support available for officers? Because I know, like responding to a duty situation or any countless other things that you and your team go through is incredibly difficult. So are we, where are we in terms of providing that kind of a resource? And do we need to be better about it?
Thank you for that question. In fact, Trustee Sokabrand asked me a question earlier, and it was budget related, but it's relevant to what you're talking about now. Now, first, domestic violence, we know occurs in the village, but it's underreported. I know that as well. But we do have a domestic violence advocate that we work with from the Sojourner Family Peace Center. So we do make those referrals, and it's something that our officers take seriously, as they should, with the mandatory arrest law in the state of Wisconsin. Now, the traumas that the officers face, we partnered or contracted with First Responder Psychological Services, which is an LLC comprised of psychologists, social workers, interns, peer mentors, and those types of things. So all of our officers are mandated to attend a yearly neck up checkup or above the neck check. And that could be anywhere from the time could be anywhere from 10 minutes to 4 hours, depending on what they needed to talk about or wanted to talk about. But it is mandated for every employee of the police department, civilian staff included, professional staff included. And we find that that's necessary. So in addition to the yearly checks, they also receive 2 additional visits should they need. And First Responder Psychological Services also provide debrief services, training, anything that we might need should an incident arise, a significant incident that impacts us all. First Responder Psychological Services provides that to us.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And sort of, how would we know if we needed more?
Well, I think that we've got a really good pulse on what's going on in the police department. And while the yearly checks are confidential, I can get a sense of how things are going without disclosure of confidential information. So I trust that the staff at First Responder Psychological Services would say, hey, maybe we should do this, or maybe we should look towards this, something like that. But how do we know that we need more? I think and some of the things that we can measure are we getting more sick calls? Are we seeing citizen complaints? Are we seeing increased uses of force? Are we seeing misbehavior, bad behavior, those types of things? Those are really significant indicators that maybe things aren't going as well as I think they are, or they could be. And maybe it's time to step in and intervene in some fashion. One of the other things to your point is, and it's not on here, but it was in the village manager's memo. I was selected by the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Death Response Team to be an executive peer support team member. So I'll be attending training on Monday and Tuesday. So that gives me just an added sense of how do I provide the best support to our staff in the police department, and partner with First Responder Psychological Services to say, this is what I'm seeing. Can you help us, or provide the services and the needs to our officers?
That's great. I mean, it's clearly something that you put a lot of thought into, and I think that everything you're doing to like build morale within the force is helpful, because the staff feels they trust you and feel comfortable. So that's great.
Thank you.
Did you have something, trustee Kudo? And I
I
see.
can wait for trustee Persink.
My question just kind of maybe piggybacks a little bit on your last statement. Before you arrived, I was lucky enough to take a walking tour around the village with one of the officers who's still on staff. I won't name names, but I probably took him further than he wanted to go and spend a lot longer than he wanted to spend walking around the Shorewood. But one of the biggest takeaways I had with him was he said that morale in the department was fairly low based on the community sort of like their thought that the community was kind of not for them or not didn't have their back and was very critical of our own police department when they thought they were doing things for the community. They felt that they were kind of being disrespected by the community or the community didn't have their backs or their support. Has that morale changed in the past 2 years, since you've come on board? Where do you see that morale kind of going? And I guess I'd have to say that one of my biggest suggestions was we'd love to see them out in the community even more. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed, has had a big impact recently as we've seen, the officers have been at a lot of the events. They've been at the farmers market. They've come to the chill. We see officers in the community and we're starting to humanize them a little bit. But could you talk a little bit about morale, department morale?
Sure. And I would say that there still is that sentiment a little bit. And in fact, I marked it on my first line here during my check-ins that a resonant topic in these discussions was the commitment to and desire for greater community engagement and the magnitude of giving and receiving respect for their service in the village. And I think because they truly want to serve, having the positive responses for what they do, and not just the community engagement, but they're out there protecting all of us as well in the village. So the service levels for community engagement and for enforcement are really important and should be appreciated because we do share a very safe village. The morale is improving. It definitely is improving. And I say that because I'm hearing that, but also because they want to be in the community more. Now, if they truly felt that the community didn't appreciate and respect them, there would be no desire for engagement. And it would really be, I'm just going to go along to get along and do the least possible to complete my 8 hours and go home. But I'm not seeing that. We are continually, and Mark does a lot of scheduling for the special events. We are continually seeing officers ask to attend, to change their hours, to do what needs to be done and what they want to do to be participative. So the tide is changing. But there were some very difficult years. There were some, and not just for Shorewood, for law enforcement in general. And there is still cast off from that.
Well, if there's anything that we can do to help, please just let us know. And, we're always there to help. I personally always there to help. I make it a point every time to wave and to do the little things. And anything that we can do to help morale, please let us know.
Thank you. And with that, I know that you mentioned that you did a walk along. Please come now that the weather's going to hopefully start warming up. Please come do a ride along. Please come do a walk along. Our officers really, really like that. So you can actually see what they're doing, see what they see, and get out with them in the community. But also, as we're approaching the spring months, May is Law Enforcement Memorial Week. And I know last year we did a proclamation for law enforcement officers Memorial Day. But we will also be hosting an open house at the police department. And this is really an opportunity for all of the community, all of the village to come in and just say thanks. So that date will be published soon, and we'll have more information about that. But
just one final note on that, Coffee with a Cop, fantastic. I mean, there was only a handful of residents came out, but you guys had snacks and treats and coffee. And so I would hope that more people take you up on that, if not just to get a quick little treat and say hi to the officers. But That was a fantastic opportunity, the last one you had at Corner Bakery.
Thank you. Yeah, we are looking at partnering with Metro Market to host a coffee with a cop. So we haven't solidified any of the details yet, but we'll get that information published. But that's something that we most certainly will continue as well. And Shorewood certainly has no shortages of places to have coffee. So believe me, I know them all.
Trustee Kudo?
Great segue to Metro Market. Under collaboration, can you give an update on how it's going? I know they've made some changes, but I know that there were also some difficulties. So where do we stand right now?
So we haven't met in a little while, with the holidays and whatnot. But Mark is in regular communication with them. They're inquiring about the cost for service that they have there, things that they can continually do, make improvements. We know that they have made some improvements based on the recommendations of our meetings, and we are seeing a slight decrease in calls for service. Now, whether that's because they're not calling or because it's a legitimate decrease in some of the disorder that we had seen prior, still has yet to be seen. But those are conversations that are ongoing, and we do make regular visits to the Metro Market just to make sure that things are going well and that our shoppers are as safe as they can be in the short time that we're there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can actually, Captain Mark and I met with them, I think, since the holidays, and they've done some rearranging of the checkout areas and with more direction around door access. And they are seeing a big decrease in theft. And so that's why there are fewer calls. And they also had a change in security personnel. I think they had somebody on staff who wasn't the best match for the environment. And so they have some that are, more compatible with the environment, and so things are not escalating the same way to calls for service. So those were two things, and they have taken recommendations from the department, and they also, our meetings have really encouraged them to be more proactive in looking at what's going on with the store and what they can take. What actions they can take. And they also have a manager now who has been there for a good 6 months, who actually was in the original Kohl's. I think I remember him as a 15-year-old.
His name's Dan.
Yeah.
And I used to work.
Okay. So anyway, so that's going really well too. All right. Didn't think I'd chime in on the police report, but.
Thank you, though.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got the next couple.
You do. It is kind of the chief worst show. Oh, and I will say I asked them about cart return, and I call it cart outreach ministry. But and they are the management said that they would look into installing some guards that prevent them from leaving the area. So anyway, all right. We are on to consideration of ordinance 3050, amending subsection 500-14 general parking restrictions and 500-27 removal of illegally parked vehicles. So this is in our packet, and it's been to committee. And Trustee Arndorfer is not here, but were you here? Or Trustee Kudo, does anyone from the committee want to report?
I wasn't prepared to. Go ahead.
Good.
Oh, Brad?
I think you must have approved it because it's
Yeah,
here.
I think we approved 3-0, I believe, the general parking restrictions and the removal of the illegally parked vehicles. I think I was the only dissenter on the next one. Off.
I believe so. Yep.
That's accurate.
All right, so I'm just going to open it up. Is there anything that do you have prepared comments that you want to say? Do you want to just open it up for questions?
I'm happy to take some questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Is there a motion to approve? Trustee Ursing?
Or I move to recommend approval of ordinance 3050.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Lynn. Any discussion? All those in favor? Say aye. Oh, is it a roll call because it's an ordinance? Yeah.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
President McKay,
Yes.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee Kudo,
Yes, please.
trustee Stokbrand.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0.
Great. So the next item, 9C, consider ordinance 3051, amending subsection 500-17, parking prohibited. Similarly, there is a memo. It's with an ordinance attached. This came out of committee, obviously recommending to approve with some dissent. Are there any questions for Chief Worth or Captain Robleski?
I just have a question. Did you get any, thank you for the letter, the notice.
You're welcome.
Did you get any feedback?
None.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Actually,
question.
I have,
Yeah.
I just have one piece of feedback. This is when trustee Stokebrand mentioned getting a letter. So when we send the letters, do we send them only to the property owners or do we send them to the tenants too? Because I heard from a resident on Downer who didn't get the letter because they are a renter and they got it after the fact from their landlord was like, oh, sorry, I was out of town and didn't see this. So I want to flag for staff that moving forward, if we are sending communications to impacted residences, I think that we should send to owner and tenant. That way we don't miss people. So that's all.
The requests for these letters were specific to the impacted houses on Lake Drive, immediate to the sign.
That's fine. And I'm pretty, it just came up in my mind. So I wanted to flag it as an issue generally.
I appreciate that. We might want, so make it distinct that it's not feedback about.
Yeah, not
this
about
item.
this particular, it's
But
just kind of in general.
But would we
Yes.
have? Would we?
I mean, you send it to the property address, right? You just mail it to the actual address and not necessarily, because.
And as a renter, I can tell you that I have not gotten communications, and I knew that happened because I'd been a property owner, so I didn't get flipped out about it, but it can be really frustrating. So thank you. So, but motion to approve this item.
I move to recommend approval of ordinance 3051.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Yes?
I just wanted to say, I'm going to oppose this because I feel that losing more parking on Lake Drive, on the east side specifically, which is the only side that we'll have left for visitors to the beach. I really wish we would just delay this until Lake Drive was redone to see how much it slows down traffic and what the bump outs will do to the situation. So it's not very welcoming to me, so I will vote no.
All right, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, there will be a roll call.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
President McKay,
Aye.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
trustee Stokebrand,
Nay.
trustee Kudo.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-1.
Thank you. 9D, consider notification of police department grant submissions. I believe this came from committee as well. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
I can make a motion. I move to allow the Shorewood Police Department to continue to apply for federal and state grants without seeking approval from the village board prior to submitting each individual grant application, with the understanding that the village's finance department will be notified when an application has been submitted and when grant funds have been secured.
Second.
Motion by trustee Moore Baldoff, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion?
In the committee, we did discuss a little bit about possibly putting the information on the website grants applied for, if they were received, they were denied. I don't know if we've,
The grants that we have are published on the department's website.
okay,
And that
Okay.
was based on your request from public safety.
okay.
And one thing that Captain Robleski just brought to my attention, I know this came up during committee, you had mentioned private grants as well. And I may have inadvertently left that out from this motion.
For some reason, I recall, I was in that committee meeting and I recall, did you make the recommendation or was it
You're right.
left?
There's a couple things. I
Oh,
think we probably need to clean up a little bit on this.
okay.
One being private grants, the other one, if I remember correctly, being notification to the village manager on grant application. I just, if I remember correctly, chief. I may not. But I thought in the meeting I made the point that I just wanted to make sure that, and this wasn't for you or even for this board at this particular time, but somewhere down in the future, some future police chief wasn't trying to get grants for sort of militarized vehicles or something along those lines without the board knowing about it beforehand. And so that was just looking for the village manager to serve as sort of an assurance that the future board would be notified if something like that was going to happen. And again, this nothing to do with you or this current board. It was sort of a safety mechanism that I wanted built into the.
I understand. Thank you. Complete oversight on my part, not to include it. It was always my intention. But absolutely an oversight to leave the village manager out. Sorry, Rebecca.
Could I just make like a friendly amendment to the motion
Mhm.
to include, so it would be to continue to apply for federal, state, and private grants. And then with the understanding that the village manager and the village's finance department will be notified. Does that get it done?
Totally.
Okay.
You agree? Okay,
Great.
any further? Oh,
One last thing I wanted to add too is just, I understand the need for it to be this way, but whenever possible, can we be informed as a best practice? Because I would certainly like to see it. I understand that sometimes these things have to move quickly and there's no time to get it to the board and all of that. But I really do think that our role here is to look at everything, and we get sent everything by everybody from everywhere else in the community. And so I would still like to see, just as a best practice, things sent to us. I understand it doesn't need to be part of this motion, and obviously it's not going to work every time, but as much as possible,
Yes.
just as a best practice.
Yes, thank you.
But Trustee Lynn, I think that was the expectation, is that if that it's not time sensitive, that it's coming before you. And that if it is time sensitive, it's coming back to you as a reported item.
Perfect. Thank you.
right. So thank you for confirming that intent.
I have a question then, because I'm not remembering how other departments so if the village broadly is pursuing a grant, is that coming before us?
Yes, other departments, and we've seen it most frequently with the Department of Public Works.
Okay,
but
yep, that's right.
When because some of their grants actually require the village board to
Like a
approve
resolution.
the submission with a
Okay.
resolution. So yes.
Okay, but none of the other departments need similar flexibility at this time?
No, the only other instance again has occurred with Public Works, and during that night of the meeting, I've talked with you about it and said, hey,
Okay.
we're going to pursue this. Does anyone have an objection? Simply under my report. But it's the intention to always come to the group before proceeding.
Okay. I mean, I definitely, want to know what's going on, but I also never want us to miss out on getting money. So anytime we need flexibility, I want to make sure that staff has it.
And I also, think that there's a distinction between intent to want to apply. There's many things that you have to put an organization on notice that you may want to submit a full application. So that I would not consider to come before you, because we don't want to waste anybody's time. But if there were to be full-blown applications submitted for items, we would bring them back to you so that we were all in the know.
Thank you. And I just want to say I appreciate taking the time to consider this and think it through from a practical, but also a oversight, given the sensitivity of, police resources and things like that. So
Thank you.
all right. So this is not a roll call vote, I believe. And there is a motion on the floor and a second. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I believe that concludes the Chief Worth show for this evening.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Have a great rest of the night.
All right. 9E, considered contract award for 2023 ash tree removals. This item is presented in the packet with a memo. Are there any questions? I believe Director Bushlick is not feeling well, so left for the evening. So you can direct any questions to Manager Ewald. Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve. And this came through committee, right?
No.
No.
Okay. Yes.
So it looks like, I guess I'm a little confused about the different things we can do with the River Park Connector money without having a little more input. I guess I'm inclined to, what is it, about $1,000 a tree? Award, no, option number 2, award the contract in amount not to exceed 75,000 and direct staff to identify trees to be removed from the scope of work to stay in the budget. I would rather have more people involved in budget and finance decide what we're going to do with, or even parks. If we're not using the money, the $40,000 or the $23,000 park bond reserves.
If this is not timely, could we defer until Leanne, till our next meeting, so we can have a sort of a more robust conversation with Leanne about this?
I'm guessing a tree contract, you probably want to execute. It's timely in terms of what.
That's what I'm asking. Is it a timely?
Mhm.
It's not gonna, it won't last until.
Well, and
weeks
I'd
from now.
like to hear a little bit more about what scope of discussion you're feeling is.
I would as well.
To defer.
Well, no, about any, questions
Yeah.
associated with the funds.
So if there is a desire to defer, I would want to know what scope of discussion you'd be expecting at that time. Or what is it that you need to know from Leanne?
With regards to the financial situation, I don't see that as much as being a public works issue as something that I could speak to and address. So, and specifically with the River Park pathways, we don't have 23,000 in bond reserves to utilize towards that project because the Hubbard Park parking lot went over budget. So there are no longer bond reserves to utilize. That means that we don't have sufficient dollars in order to execute the River Park pathway. At the same time, and this is something that came up within the Q4 report, we are at a very low dollar amount for capital reserves, the lowest that we have been at since I've been here. So that means that any project that you have that goes over budget, that's not necessarily, everyone can do the best job of estimating, the best job doing things, that thing goes out to bid. You're going to have to make decisions on what does and doesn't happen based upon the budget that's allocated. So in not proceeding with the project, it provides you with more cushion from that perspective. So when I look at this, I'm looking at this more so through your business lens and project deployment. I don't see these funds being reallocated. It would never be my business recommendation that you reallocate the remaining balance of the River Park funds for another project at this time, and that you continue to maintain them as bond reserves. That being said, the overage on these 2 projects specifically, which have been identified within your capital budget for the 2023 year, are minimal overages. You're talking about around 3,000. So my recommendation to you is that by all means, like Trustee Stoker suggested, if you guys want to cap it at the 75, you're welcome to do that. No issues there. That's the direction we want to receive. In the alternative, if you do want to proceed with the total amount, then my recommendation to you, just from the financial perspective, is that you're taking those remaining funds for River Park Pathway, putting them to capital reserves so that they're there for utilization if needed with any of the projects that you have identified within your 2023 capital budget. And I can go through that again if you'd like me to.
No, it makes
So it's the 40,000 that we would be putting in capital.
Correct.
And we're talking about a $3,000 difference between the complete project cost and then just capping it at 75
For ash tree removal.
for ash tree removal.
Correct.
Is what I'm, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The budgeted.
And my only other question is, I apologize, I should know this, but have we worked with Wallace? Has Wallace been, have we worked with him in the past? What has that relationship been like?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I would think if there is a recommendation related to a vendor, that would indicate we take a higher bid, for example, because of performance,
Right.
that usually is included in the memo.
I just, there's a Forester Tree Service is double the amount. And so I would love to know the difference in cost, but if Wallace can do it for half the amount then, and do an effective job, and they've done an effective job before, then I'm all for it. If that's what Leanne recommends, then
Yeah, it is the recommendation, and we're
Yep.
not getting a conflicting recommendation. Trustee
Are
Stokebrand,
you ready for a motion?
as long as we're concluded on that. Okay. I would take a motion.
I move that a contract for ash removal be awarded to Wallace Tree Care in an amount not to exceed $75,000 and direct staff to identify a corresponding reduction in the scope of work.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I can repeat it.
Okay.
Okay. I move that the contract for ash removal be awarded to the Wallace Tree Care in the amount not to exceed 75,000 and direct staff to identify a corresponding reduction in the scope of work.
Oh, so option 2.
Yes.
I read it verbatim.
Yes, that's why I was happy to repeat it because I wrote it.
Mhm. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I just had a mind blip. Just didn't hear it.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I'm not going to support it because we have a ash tree removal policy, and so I'm comfortable with an extra $3,000 to stick with the policy and keep up with this disease. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Oh, no, not me. Sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. So that is a 2-4 vote. So motion fails. Is there an alternative motion at this time? Trustee Ursink.
yes, I will move that a contract for the 2023 ash removal be awarded to Wallace Tree Care in the amount of $78,830.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 5-1. All right, moving on to the next item, which is 9F, consider Downer Avenue bike lane configuration. So these materials are in our packet. It's been at committee once or twice.
Twice.
Okay, want to tell us the recommendation?
I actually think that this conversation was I don't want to say all over the place, but the feedback was fairly sort of inconsistent. We had at our first meeting, we had two residents that one, weren't necessarily opposed to removing parking, but they did not want to remove parking on their side of the street, so the east and the west side of the street. In the second meeting, we came back and we had another group of residents and sort of committee members, different sort of committee members with the Senior Resource Center and the Parks and Open Spaces Committee or Bike and Ped Safety Committee. I guess is that all one, but they all stood up in favor for a bike lane and with the removal of parking on one of the sides of streets that was not sort of identified which would be recommended. At that time, our board recommended the west side of the street to remove parking on the west side of the street and then keep the parking on the east side of the street. We have one resident board member who then, is supportive of it, but then recommended removing the parking on the west side of the street, not the east side of the street. So it is really sort of all over the place a little bit with the direction we want to head. I think the overall consensus was we really want to focus on being a more bike-friendly community, and by removing this parking and allowing a free bike lane would be really helpful for school transportation, for people using the street to get to UWM, as well as students using it to get to the various schools in the community. So our recommendation was at the time to remove the parking on the west side of the street.
Okay, but we are given both options in the motions, two alternative motions this evening. All right. Any questions, or is there a motion, or are there any members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter? Yes, sir. You can come up and share your name and address.
Hi, I'm Chris Cuss, 3551 Downer. It's about the process, how this went through. For that first meeting, it was announced, and I showed up, and they're like, nope, it's the next week, but you can speak today. So I did that. And then I showed up the next week, and the doors were all locked. Another resident showed up. He's like, yeah, there's supposed to be a meeting tonight. And there wasn't. And then next thing I know, I'm getting a letter saying, hey, we're going to talk about it and pretty much vote on it tonight. So a little bit frustrated. And personally, I'd like to see it go a little bit further to discuss if we are all over the place. Maybe we need to have more discussions to be more focused. But I was a little bit frustrated with that. And it reminded me back 20 years ago when Marquette was discussing its campus circle stuff. And I went to speak there a couple times, and I went to Leahy's office, and they were like, oh yeah, the next meeting is this time. And I showed up, and they're like, yeah, that was the last meeting. I'm like, so I missed one. So it's like rehashed from 20 years ago. So
you got triggered.
How are you going to vote? But thanks.
Appreciate that. So do you have a position on the outcome that you prefer?
I found some of the documentation. I was frustrated that it looked like they did the bike evaluation during July, when like no kids are riding around. I went online and saw like there are places that you could rent cameras that they can put up and like count even bikes on this. I'm like, oh, you should rent those for like a year and you could figure out what it really is. But when you had said that, what are the Sharons or
Sheros? Yeah.
The Sheros, when I read up on that, I was like, that's the solution from what I was thinking. So that's my opinion. But keep part of it. Yeah. I didn't know what a Shero was, but now I know.
Is that what it is now?
No, now there's no markings. And I brought that up in the context of if we were keeping parking on both lanes, that would be.
But thank you for the information. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for coming this evening. All right, anyone else who would like to be heard? Okay. Okay, so is there a motion?
I will make a motion based off of what the recommendation was within our meeting. And I think just for clarification, there was just a mix up with the dates Leanne had posted, and she, we apologize. It was just a total mix up. It wasn't like we were trying to hide anything. So I really apologize for that. She sent out postcards with a different date, and anyway, that's why we're here right now. So I guess side of the street. I will make a motion. I move that marked bike lanes be included in the 2024 reconstruction of the 35 3,800 to 3,900 blocks of North Downer Avenue with parking to be provided on the west side and eliminate on the east side to be consistent with the 400 to 4,200 blocks of North Downer. Oh, yeah, I know.
What?
Sorry, I think I read the west side. Mark Violet parking on the west side.
I thought you'd read
Yep,
parking on
yep.
the west side, no parking on the
Yep,
east side.
yep, that's.
Is that what you
And that's
want?
one you
Is that
wanted?
what you wanted to
Yeah,
read?
no. I wanted to read the other one. Sorry, just to be
Oh.
consistent with what our committee did, and I just misread that one. So I apologize.
Well, I was going to second your motion, but if that's not what you want.
I'm gonna
second it.
No, I'm gonna read the right one. I'm gonna read that. So I apologize. Take two. I move that the marked bike lanes be included in the 2024 reconstruction of the 35 to 3,900 blocks of North Downer Avenue, with parking to be provided on the east side and eliminated on the west side to be consistent with the future North Lake Drive design.
Is there a second?
I look at the other way. I mean, I think that there are.
If there's no second, it fails.
So I'm also just the piece about, I feel like this either didn't come up in committee or my brain did not retain this information. It feels like we should want to be consistent with the other side of Capitol.
Right.
So to me, that's pretty significant because I feel like if you're riding your bike, and you're parking, I don't know, it just feels like you would want it to be consistent with what's happening on the other side, like north of Capitol.
Which is west side.
Right.
Parking. Yeah.
I feel like that little area though creates this kind of
You know what?
an inner square that you can.
I think you made a motion. We have to see if there's a second. And if there's no second, then it'll fail. And then we can go to another one. Or you can withdraw your first and we can have some discussion before.
So I'll withdraw my first.
Okay.
And I know Jim is the resident and he his appetite was for the reverse of that motion. So I wanted to read the motion because that's what we agreed on in committee. But after speaking to Jim and, I do think there is some value to eliminating the other side of the street parking. I guess where I'm coming from is there's kind of an inner sort of square, whereas if you could, get around the village that way, like going down to River Park and up and around, I think that that makes a lot more sense because you don't have to cross over from one side of the street to the other. But that would be my only, but if you want to keep consistent with Downer, there is no parking on the east side of the street past Capitol. So that would be keeping it consistent with what's north of Capitol.
So if the motion's withdrawn, then we can discuss, right?
I'll withdraw the motion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you're looking at houses that face Downer Avenue, there's a fair number of what I think are rental, maybe some owner occupied houses on the west side of Downer Avenue, just south of Capitol Drive. I think keeping consistency with north Downer Avenue, north of Capitol Drive makes a lot of sense. And I'd also like to make sure that folks that live there, if we're kind of agnostic about which way to go, that folks that live there at least have the option to park outside of their own houses. In that stretch, I'm trying to think of all the way down to Milwaukee, but I just feel like there are a lot more houses, at least down to the 3,500 block, which is what this is, that face Downer Avenue. So I would be in favor of parking on the west side.
The Milwaukee side's messy because it hits UWM.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think the parking should be available on the west side, because I think, the bike lanes are going to be on both sides. So it's going both directions in terms of which way you're going. So, if you're changing directions, you have to cross the street anyways. I just think, I think that consistency from one end of our village all the way to the other end is the proper way. It's actually not a huge deal for bikers as much as it is for people parking to know that this is always the side you can park on. So I would just like to keep that on one side and keep the bike lanes, the same direction.
I can make it. You want to make a motion?
I'll make
I-
I'll make the motion.
I,
You've
could I, I'm having trouble with this one because, we had, we lost parking on Lake Drive. This is sort of still within access to, Atwater Beach. We don't have to eliminate parking. We also heard a lot from residents with the new development going up at Sunseekers that they were very concerned about parking. And because we don't have, I'm all for bike lanes and I'm all for reducing car traffic, but we aren't there yet and we don't have a master plan of how we're going to approach these things. And so I'm just kind of like stuck with it. And I know that you had a lot of discussion at committee, and I would love to say yes to bike lanes because we weren't able to get there on Lake Drive. But that's what's going on in my head and just all these experiences over the past 2 years of kind of conflicting feelings and people don't like to lose parking.
We are having dedicated bike lanes north and southbound on Lake Drive.
Mm-hmm.
You just said that we didn't get where we wanted to be on bike.
Oh,
Lake
the
Drive.
protected bike lanes.
Oh.
And we're not talking about protected bike lanes here.
No, I know that. Yeah. So, and I am a biker, so it makes no sense for me not to support this, but just from a policy and based on resident feedback from that exact neighborhood just 2 years ago. And we have a neighbor here this evening.
There is a reasonable case to not do the bike lanes, I think. I mean, I think the street reconstruction in general is going to be a huge improvement for bikers. I do think that is going to lead to more people biking on Downer, because right now as a cyclist, I avoid Downer, just because of the state of, so I zip through the neighborhoods, and it would be nice to have the bike lanes. But I mean, I can definitely see all sides of this one. It's not a clear cut. If we proceed with bike lanes, I think getting rid of parking on the east side, keeping it on the west side is the right move. But I can see the case, at least. I am leaning towards the bike lanes, but that's, there's a case to be made. Sorry.
And I wish we were there. Like, I wish we had a complete streets and, we just aren't there yet.
Well,
We haven't done.
we can get there tonight with a vote for this.
We can get
So,
piecemeal. Yep.
I will make the motion, and if it fails, we'll move on. But I move that the marked bike lanes be
Oh,
included.
sorry. Were there members of the public that wanted to be heard on this? Barbara Kiley Miller? Yeah.
Barbara Kiley Miller, 4051 North Downer. I just wanted to add that the reason there's not parking on the east side of Downer, north of Capitol, is because the road narrows quite a bit once you move north. There aren't any bike, symbols on the street or any lanes, but nobody seems to have trouble biking. Yeah. Cheryl would be my vote if I got one. So I agree with you.
Yes, sir. I knew you were here for this item. You're
What can I say?
your name and address, please.
Concerning the
Your name and address, please, sir.
Scott Knuth, 2600 East of Beverly. As I reiterated initially, logically, there's an additional comment that I have concerning east or west side. On further recollection, there's more duplexes and more families on the west side. So if you put the parking on the east side, theoretically, there's more people that are going to cross mid-block to get to the other side, okay? Which counters my initial logical request. So I'm torn right now. I'm thinking for the public safety, the greater good is to have parking on the west side. And
I appreciate you thinking
yeah,
about
we'll
the
let it
greater
go at
good.
that. Concerning north and south of Capitol Drive, that's moot because you can change that also. Okay, if you want that consistency, but because down or up to Capitol Drive is an arterial, and north of Capitol Drive, it is not an arterial. There's that difference there. Okay, so for the greater good, it's probably, I think, the west side.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, well, it's big of you. I appreciate it. Okay. Yes, Trustee Kudo?
Now I'm with Trustee Lynn. I mean, I'm kind of like, why not have parking on both sides? What's the?
You're actually with President McCaig.
I wish Sandy Pendleton
It
was
doesn't
here.
happen often, so I want to.
But I mean, it's,
Yeah.
We had the Senior Resource Center come and promote a bike lane. Sandy Pendleton and his group came and promote the bike lane. Katie Now was here to promote one bike lane. So we did have another
We had a
group that was
robust
here,
discussion.
for bike ped safety, walkability. I think it really goes kind of hand in hand with the direction that we're all trying to get to in the village, get away from more cars and promote more biking.
I do think the bike lanes, it is a net gain. I mean, I think even if it's just a +1, it's still a net gain. This is just, I think it's a tough decision. I think tonight was full of a few tough decisions, especially on the Public Works Committee. But I think, while I don't think not having bike lanes would be the worst thing in the world, it is, I think, a net gain to have the bike lanes. And the only way to do that is eliminate the parking. I think we just have to kind of take that in consideration and then take the secondary consideration, which is where do people need to park? So this second option, I think, with parking on the west side, that is my preferred, even though it's just barely.
Well, I will just being a former duplex renter and having way too many cars to not, you just have more cars in a rental unit because people are not sharing cars. And so removing the parking in a densely populated block with multi-family units, again, I just think we don't need to do it and we don't have a policy about doing it. So I'm going to vote no, but you can go ahead and make the motion.
I'll make a motion. We'll see where it goes. I move that marked bike lanes be included in the 2024 reconstruction of the 35 to 3900 blocks of North Downer Avenue, with parking to be provided on the west side and eliminated on the east side to be consistent with the 400 to 4200 blocks of North Downer Avenue.
Second.
All right, motion by Trustee Ursing, seconded by Trustee Moore Baldoff. Is this a roll call? Any further? No, it's not a roll call. Further discussion? All right, so
do we know if we don't like this, if this just doesn't work, how long? Because it's not a state highway.
Right, 3 to 5 years is
for the paint to wear off, and we can say.
Mm-hmm.
Just from personal experience, we did have
this
this discussion about bike lanes on Oakland Avenue like 6 or 7 years ago, and that comment was brought up as well, a similar type of comment, and it's slightly more complicated than that, unfortunately.
Well, similarly, we could not pass this now, and then when we do complete streets planning, which I think is 2024, or am I just hoping that it's a priority for 2024, then we would have a comprehensive approach to this that aligns with the transportation study. But we have a motion on the floor and a second. Yes, Trustee Kudo.
And the street is not wide enough to have bike lanes and parking on both sides.
We'd have to cut trees to move the curbs.
It's the same. It's the same with this. It's like the same situation as Lake Drive. Because the roads are the same
This
width.
does not include the buffers, does it? Or does it? Does
No.
this include the
No.
3-foot buffers? No?
It's just
Okay, let's take,
not great.
okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries 5-1. Okay, Barbara, put it down that I voted with the neighborhood once. Okay.
Yes.
Get the time. Okay. Moving on to the next item. Consider award of 2023 River Park irrigation contract. This item is presented and with the materials in our packet. There are two options in front of us with suggested motions. Manager Ewald is here to ask any questions. Are there any questions?
I'll just say that this is a similar situation than that we had with the ash tree removal project that we discussed earlier. The low bid, we budgeted $25,000 for this project. Low bid came in at 29 and some change. So the option here is to either utilize some of the capital reserve, or in this case, I guess it would be to not do the project.
Thank you very much. Motion? Yes.
I move that a contract for the 2023 River Park irrigation be awarded to RKM Irrigation in the amount of $28,400 to be funded through the 2023 capital budget and capital reserves, affirming that River Park pathway will not proceed.
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes.
As a frequent user down here, I think it's incredibly important that we maintain the greens and that green space, and this will go a long way in helping that.
I agree. I mean, I'm there every weekend. What I'd say is if we are going to improve the irrigation system, I assume that means that the growing of grass will also improve down there, which means that we're going to need to probably address the mowing situation in those soccer fields because it is generally incredibly long grass.
Point taken. Yes.
I think we just transferred vendors from the green team to Volante, and it'd be great to get an update from Leanne as far as how that relationship is going. I know they weren't living up to expectations at one point, and they've had conversations. I think they've had a lot of back and forth, and I think Leanne was hopeful that they'd get there, but it'd be nice to hear from her to see where she thinks that is. But I would assume that grass is going to grow bigger, greener, and it's going to need to be cut more frequently. So
yeah, I mean, but there just were a lot of complaints. From families, children working soccer.
Exactly. I mean, baseball as well.
Yep.
Point noted. All right, so there is a motion, or
Did that have was that a second?
Sure, second.
I think it was.
I'm sorry.
yeah, so we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. 9H, consider 2023-2024 police union labor agreement. If there's unanimous consent, I would recommend that we move this item to before adjournment, after items of after future items.
Correct.
And as it does require a closed session. All those, everybody in agreement on that? Okay. So that brings us to report of village officials. 10A, village president. I met with Congresswoman Gwen Moore last week for my municipal leader. Was that in your village manager update? No. We talked about, anyway, I requested an earmark for lead lateral replacement for 2024, and staff did an amazing job. The deadline was that day, and she strongly encouraged that we apply. So staff was able to get that in on time. Really appreciate that. She also shared several other, or her staffer followed up on several other grant programs for combined sewer, possibly other lead lateral funds. I think there was a third, but anyway, we also talked about streetlight replacement. But she was most excited about lead laterals. That, I believe, is everything from me. 10B, Village Trustees.
On lead laterals, was it recently at the men's club, stopped by the men's club, and Leanne was there presenting about our lead lateral replacement and gave a really fantastic presentation about lead laterals and answered a lot of questions. A lot of the questions were not about lead laterals, but yet, about completely random things in the village that the men's club wanted to talk about. But it was a fantastic conversation, and really appreciated her being there and taking the time to do that and answer all of the questions that she received.
Any other trustees? Yes.
I just want to remind everyone, as we have now for quite some time, about voting, in-person voting that starts tomorrow. So I want to thank Carol and the staff for what will end up being a flawless season of voting, and remind everyone to, I'm so tired, to remind everyone to vote on April 4th.
Or before.
Or before.
Vote early and often.
At least vote
All
early.
Don't.
Not
That's my legal advice. Okay.
That's why he's here.
So, all right. Village manager report. All right, thank you. Item 11, future items of consideration. It looks like there's one. Consider policy on dark sky compliance. Would anybody like to?
So this was this item was brought to our attention from the Parks and Open Spaces Committee. Gary Brunk brought this up to a couple of us through email, and just really wanted this to be part of the conversation when we start discussing our street lighting and our future of street lighting. So wanted to make this, just kind of bring this to the table and have everybody do a little bit more research on the dark sky compliance, and see if this would be a good fit for the village of Shorewood, which I would support.
Are you making a motion?
I'd like to move a consideration of a policy on dark sky compliance.
I'll second that. Or, I mean, it's a long process. There's, I believe, one official dark sky site in the state of Wisconsin. That's the very tip of Door County. And so I don't know what the different levels, because of a lot of the light pollution in Milwaukee. I'm interested in having the conversation.
I guess how can we explore the conversation?
Let's ask the village manager.
Could we throw it to a committee?
It's not fighting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so can we put it in public?
Could we throw it to Strategic Initiatives Committee?
Or Public Works?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Yes.
So we have not
Dog
looked
to the
into
bone,
this.
I see.
We have not looked into this to any level of degree other than, reviewing the article that was provided, because it didn't get allocated to any direction. So, questions to be explored.
So friendly amendment, well, that wasn't seconded. So can we add the Special Initiatives Committee be considered through special initiatives?
So
Strategic.
I know that this is just gonna kill Jerry, but I would recommend that it stay at Public Works, because Leanne is also the one working on streetlights.
Sorry.
Things that are.
That's reasonable.
It's
Next time,
I
buddy.
know,
Next
but
time.
Jerry,
You'll
next
be
time.
there.
Would you like chickens?
You'll be there.
There's nothing strategic about chicks. Okay, we're
So,
getting silly,
in-
people.
So that would be Public Works instead of Strategic Initiatives. Consider through the Public Works. We'll make the motion and then. Oh, this is why you're here. If this is why Barbara's here.
Okay.
Wait.
There's no, just so you know, I mean, you can say something, but just so you know, all it is to approve it as an agenda item. Okay.
So we are going to approve a consideration. Hold on. You got it? Dark sky compliance through Public Works Committee. Okay.
All right, so we have a first. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
Sorry.
second by trustee Kudo.
Sorry.
Any discussion from board members?
Our
Trustee
current lights are so bad that they are dark sky compliant.
Okay, well then, that's it.
Well played.
In
That's from
opposition to
Leanne.
replacement then.
It's
Okay.
not just me.
That's a good one. Okay.
Barbara Kylie Miller again, same address. Something similar came before the Plan Commission in October of 2015. Our former planning director presented the idea of a residential lighting ordinance because 2 residents complained about the landscape lighting in their neighbor's yard, which was a little too aggressive for their taste and light spillage and all that. At the time, there were 9 commissioners, and of the 8 that were present that night, it was a non-starter. I won't read you all the reasons from the minutes why we did not think this was a good idea as an inner ring suburb of a major metropolitan area. But I would suggest whichever committee looks at this, that you review those minutes from October 2015 to find out why we didn't think this was appropriate. We did go on to approve a commercial lighting ordinance that was supposed to shield neighboring properties, especially from gas stations, for light spillage. And so you might want to review that as well.
Appreciate it.
Noted.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. There's a spider going across here, so just so you.
Come on.
It's, oh, no, it's right on it's on our thing. Oh,
Oh, okay. I thought it was,
Don't
okay.
worry about it. Let it go. Let it.
It looked like it was on the floor. And
Oh, it's under the table now. Hey, good luck to it.
it was just distracting me. It kept like, okay. Woo! All right, people. All right, so next we have, is there a
I had another
motion?
item.
Oh,
Something that came up on at the candidate forum was it was a question about projects in the village, and I think it's time that, not that we don't have enough projects, but I think it's time that we at least have a discussion about doing something with the groins at Atwater Beach. And, when I was hearing you talking about Gwen Moore and grants, it just, I know that some municipalities on the North Shore got $500,000 to go towards a library. And I thought, boy, I would sure like to have get some grant money to see what we could do with the groins at Atwater. So I would like to, they're the jetties.
Oh,
Hang jetties.
okay.
The
The old
The
dilapidated.
DNR calls them the groins. I'd like to move that, I'm not sure I just move that at some level, the village board or a committee start to discuss how to improve the jetties or the groins at Atwater Beach.
Just they're the pier, well, those pier like
Yeah.
structures that go out there.
Yeah.
Strategic initiatives.
it works really.
DPW is going to have the most
Yeah.
knowledge of vendors and stuff, but I really think it could be a strategic initiative because it's so unique. I don't.
Okay, I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion by trustee Stokebrand with a second by trustee Lynn. Any discussion?
The motion is to. Can someone read the motion?
I had discussed. What did you?
I had Trustee Stokebrand to have either the village board or committee explore strategic initiatives for jetties.
Think.
Groins.
Improve. Should have used the word
they have
improve.
to- Yeah. I think. How about, could we refer the matter to strategic initiatives for research and review on existing information related, because it has been reviewed in the past. So that would be the place to start.
My only question would be, not that portion of it, but a process question. My understanding that you have sole discretion where it gets placed, it gets placed to, and not necessarily us.
We can make it part of the,
Okay, I'm just,
yeah.
that was my understanding. So just,
I defer,
Does not matter to me. We're gonna start with some education.
Yeah.
That's,
It-
you know,
yeah.
everyone will get
so-
it. It'll be in the packet.
Right. So make a motion to refer this item, but what is the item?
explore improvements to the jetties at Atwater Beach.
To strategic initiatives for review.
Strategic initiatives for,
You can leave it at strategic initiatives, but it sounds like we want to put a
Figure out.
committee
just
and
get a baseline.
baseline. And you did second? friendly
Second,
amendment?
yeah.
Okay, so motion by trustee Stokebrand, seconded by trustee Lynn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
That was an aye, not just a late.
Any other future items for consideration? All right, hearing none.
Motion to adjourn?
No, unfortunately.
Into
A motion-
closed session.
Motion to adjourn into closed
Oh,
session pursuant
that's right.
to,
Yep.
is there a motion to adjourn, and please read the,
I move to adjourn into a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.851E to discuss negotiating strategy for police union agreement.
Second.
okay, all those in favor, it'll be a roll call vote.
Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
President McKay,
Yes.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes, please.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
We are ready.
I move that we approve the agreement between the Village of Shorewood and Police Local 07 for 2023, January 20, December 31, 20.
For a second.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokebrand, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And now, trustee Lynn, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn? So moved.
Motion to adjourn by trustee Lynn, seconded by trustee Ursink. Seeing no dissent, I will call us adjourned at 10:53.
We,